Hey, welcome everybody to a semi-impromptu debate or discussion, depending on how you want to view this particular hangout between Chris Boyer and Tim. His name's going to come up as Oscar, but he's asked that we call him Tim, so we will be calling him Tim on the discussion of theism or icktheism, basically how to best live one's life, where morality comes from, and should people tend to be theist, atheist, or possibly icktheist, which I'll allow Tim to kind of describe what he views as icktheism. But it's going to be about 90 minutes. They're going to be going back and forth for about an hour on this particular topic. And then after that, I will probably jump in a little bit on anything that I kind of want to ask about with icktheism and what I've kind of thought of the discussion as a whole. So if you have some questions at that time too, you can ask in the live chat, you can message me, and or if you want to come in, I'm sure we can get to the link. But we're going to kind of jump on right into this. I don't think you know these gentlemen. You might know Chris. He's been on Scott or Fiction's channel, but Tim is pretty new to the game. I think this is only his second hangout, and I just asked him, and he has never actually done a debate or discussion like this before. So the best way to do is just jump on in, feet first, and get your feet wet and see how it goes. But anyways, welcome to my channel, guys.
Right. Thank you, Steve.
And I know and by the way, Tim's in the UK and Chris is actually in Central Time and I'm in Pacific. So we're like doing this all across the world right now. So if the world was flat, we wouldn't have to worry about time zones, but it isn't, and we do. So obviously we don't want to go too late because I think probably Oscar doesn't want to spend 3 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the morning doing this. But anyways, Oscar, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tim, introduce yourself and tell me about your positions and why you kind of want to set this particular discussion up.
Right. Yes, I'm Tim. I'm a 71-year-old pensioner from the UK. I was born into a non-believing family. I'm one of 7. I have never believed in any religion. So I would call myself a lifelong atheist until I discovered the term icktheist or agnostic. The trouble I find with religion as a whole is that it is a top-down philosophy, whereas atheism or icktheism or whatever thing, living without a religion, is bottom-up. I do find the concept of God, to put it bluntly, Chris, is ridiculous. I have never heard a God defined as someone who I could even imagine. I can imagine the Greek gods because they were human or humanoid and things like this. So I would be atheist as far as they're concerned, but agnostic as far as the the Judeo-Christian religion is concerned. Morality, as far as I'm concerned, is based on personal responsibility first, and the idea of an evolved morality. I think our natural empathy comes from evolution. We evolved because we are a herd animal who lives in groups. And I think I've just read earlier today John Donne's poem, No Man is an Island. And although he was a Christian, I think it sums up morality for me. It's that we're all fellows. Everybody else can live without me. I can't live without other people. Now, my morality is based on 2 things. You cannot treat a sentient being as an object. And that includes actually animals. My cat, who was Oscar, by the way, is a sentient being. He's not an object. But neither are human beings. There is a sort of priority there. And the other thing is that we all, at some time or other, have power over other people or other sentient beings. We have to be able to justify that power. I remember listening to Noam Chomsky, I got that pronunciation right, saying if he was walking his granddaughter along the pavement and insisted on holding her hand, and she asked, "Granddad, why have I got to hold your hand?" He needs to be able to justify to her why he does that. And I think that applies the same with governments and things like this. I think morality is basically a consensus idea. If I leave it at that at the moment, and if we can expand.
Yeah, sounds good. Chris, why don't you kind of introduce yourself to everybody and your position, and then kind of give us a little summation of your position on all this.
Yeah, well, own YouTube channel. You can find me very easily if anybody's interested. Just search in YouTube Chris Boyer. It's just my name. And kind of the focus on my channel was just to kind of start a ministry to be able to give a rational defense for Christianity. So that is to say that I like to focus on. So that's kind of my focus of my channel. I am a Christian theist. I do welcome any and everyone. Come check out my channel, subscribe. Obviously, I'm an advocate of free speech. So if you do disagree with me, watch some of my videos. You're more than welcome to comment. I don't, I approve almost every comment. And I encourage free speech and free discussion, and encourage you to check out some of my videos and, comment accordingly. So that's just and this is my second conversation with Tim. And I do want to thank Steve for hosting this. When Tim reached out to me, wanting me to do a live debate, I told him I've never actually done a live debate before. Well, I mean, I have on other people's channel, but I never hosted any live discussion. So I'm just a little unfamiliar with how to do all that. I guess I need to learn it. But Steve, I do want to thank you for doing this. And
no problem. And if you need help setting it up on your channel, just let me know when you're free, and I'll help you set it up through events or teach you how to use OBS and stream it. Completely your choice. This is done through a Hangout. This is actually not streaming. It's just a straight Google Hangout that YouTube allows you to do through your content creator settings. But I can show you how to do it both ways if you're interested.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. I just I could probably figure it out. I just haven't, and I didn't want to open myself up to, I mean, I guess I got to just dive into it eventually one day, but
hey, Nephilim Free figured it out, so if he can, anybody can.
Yeah.
Of course, it took him a year, and it took an hour of me explaining it to him, but he eventually got it. So yeah, people blame me that Nephilim Free got back on the internet. I am responsible. I apologize.
Well, I'm more than happy to do like a private stream that I will record and upload to my video, like I did with Tim, our first conversation. But I'm just not sure about how to do the live stream quite yet. So maybe I'll get more into that. But with that said, once again, Steve, thanks for having us here. And I guess, Tim, I would just ask, would you, I mean, as a Christian theist, I believe that morality is objective. I think that we should probably start there, because I don't even know where you stand on that. Would you say that morality is subjective, or would you say that morality is objective?
I think morality is ultimately subjective. Even if you have a morality code laid out, an objective code laid out in a book or whatever, once you take it in as an individual, it becomes subjective, because you're making your own interpretations of it. Because what a book says, maybe whether it's got 2 rules or 10 rules or whatever, situations will alter circumstances will alter, your interpretation of those. So I think whether to say whether it's subjective or objective, I think is pointless.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think I would definitely disagree with that for sure. The reason I don't believe morality to be subjective is because I don't think that it's based on anybody's feelings or interpretations. Right? Granted, some things could be a little bit unclear as to know really what the right thing is to do in a certain circumstance. But that just is to say that there still is something right and wrong to do in that circumstance. I just may have difficulty with discerning what that might be. But to say that morality is ultimately subjective is if you want, I'd be interested to hear it. But to say that morality is subjective is really to say that nothing is really actually wrong. And I don't think that you believe that, do you?
No, I don't. I don't believe that. I think my difficulty with objective is that you have a set of rules set out, and almost that prevents that set of rules evolving. And you see, I would say there's a lot of I've heard debates and people going on. You've got the Bible promotes slavery. Well, what I would say at that time, people saw nothing wrong with slavery, although it was, to my mind, still immoral. But societies have evolved over the last 2,000 years or so to where we now consider the ownership of other people immoral.
Okay. Well, then I will stop you there. And immoral before we decided that it was immoral.
Sorry?
I just want to ask, you said that we've come to learn that it is immoral because our morality has changed over time, basically. But what I'm asking you is, since we've come to realize that it is immoral, when looking back, can we say that it was immoral at this specific time?
To me, it has always been immoral. But
okay.
But I think for the people living 2,000 years ago, where basically life was about warring tribes around the world, and setting out things like this, nobody saw anything wrong with owning slaves. Slaves were came about as a result of invading another country or having a war or anything like that. But as we've developed and as we've learned, we've got more knowledge, we now see, everybody sees it as immoral. I think the people at the time didn't have the knowledge we've got now.
Well, right. So like you think about like a caveman or something like that who is unfamiliar with mathematics, and maybe he doesn't know what, his times tables or what have you, perhaps. This is just an example. It doesn't mean that during this time that mathematics did not exist, or that 2 times 2 was still not 4. That is to say that mathematics is objective. It always has been objective. It is an objective fact, regardless. Yes. Okay, so regardless of what we think or feel about it, or how society has changed over time, there still seems to be this standard of what I hear you're saying is it is immoral today, and it was immoral then. Even though they thought that it wasn't immoral, it still was, is what you're saying. But that's just to say that morality is objective and not subjective. If you really think that it is immoral. if you can say that you know that slavery is wrong, then it is wrong objectively, regardless of or feels about it, or what culture may have agreed with it or not. So
how then, my problem then with the objective morals, say in another 1,000 years, societies develop more and more, it works better and better together, we work better and better together, and certain other things become a question of morality. I mean, the one that immediately jumps to mind is that it may well become immoral to think of eating meat. I don't know what our great-grandchildren, future generations will think that. So would it then have always been immoral to eat meat?
yeah, it would be if it was objective. If it was objectively wrong, some gray areas. Obviously, I agree with that. It's the objective morality is not easy to discern all the time, but there are some things that clearly are wrong and always have been wrong and always will be wrong. For example, think of child molestation. If morality is purely subjective, then you can't condemn child molestation as morally wrong. That's why I believe that it is objectively wrong, because regardless of what the child molester thinks or what you think or what I think or anybody thinks, I know that it is objectively wrong. So there are some things that I think are a lot easier to discern than others. That clearly there are some gray areas.
Yeah, I mean, take child molestation for a moment. Would you say marrying a girl off when she was 11 is moral?
Can you repeat it again?
Would you say that marrying a girl off when she was 11 was moral? Or would you say that it was child molestation, child abuse?
If they were 11 years old, I'd say that's probably immoral.
Well, it was quite common, a few hundred years ago.
Right.
Lots of societies, and if you go back to biblical time, the Bronze Age, I mean, I think most girls would have been married off as soon as puberty arose, because the lifespan of a young woman giving birth was very short indeed.
Well, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that is immoral, and there are some gray areas, but once again, it comes down to whether it is objectively moral or immoral, and that's basically what objective morality is that on subjective morality, you cannot say that anything, no matter what it is clear and cut and dried as it is. You cannot say that it is objectively wrong. It's just the way that you feel or you think about it, but there's nothing really actually wrong with it. That's why I disagree with that. And I think I think you would too, really, honestly. I think that most people, 99% of people, when pressed, I think, on this, will say that, yeah, I think that there is this objective realm in which we discern morals. Because, like I said, it just is the case that if morality is purely subjective, then there is nothing with child molestation. And I disagree with that.
No,
I think that there are things that we can know objectively are objectively wrong.
where do these objective morals come from?
Well, we first have to, I mean, there's a few different things. I mean, there's a lot of, the reason I think that there's a lot of confusion around this type of discussion is because very often you see people ethics, moral ontology, moral epistemology. So we need to understand what the definition of those terms are and what somebody means when they use them first. But to say that morality is objective, I think that we can almost, I think we can come to know that morality is objective based on our moral experience. So I would say that it's a properly basic belief. Any other reasons or arguments or anything else for us to be able to apprehend and be able to affirm that some things really are wrong. Like if you take the physical world, for example, the world of objects, and you know, when we experience objects like this right here is an object. It is objectively real because it's based on my sense experience, my experience of the physical world. When I fall down and hurt myself, I experience pain and it hurts, and I have this experience that the world around is objectively real. Now, granted, I can't prove to you that the world is objectively real, but for me, it is a properly basic belief that it is objectively real. Just like my moral experience tells me that child molestation is real experience where I am able to affirm that it's wrong, just as a properly basic belief. If that makes any sense.
Yes, but your basic, what is objective about your basic, proper basic belief? It's subjective, surely, because it's yours.
Well, it's just as objective as the real world is what I'm trying to say. The external world. I think we can agree, although we can't prove. I think that we can agree that the external world is real and objective. Correct?
I think.
Would you
yes.
say so, or
no? Yeah. What I would say. Reality is reality, whether we're living in the matrix or we're not living in the matrix. It's the rules of the game. Reality is about things. These silly arguments about whether one's living in the matrix or a brain in a vat, I think, are fatuous.
Let's talk about that.
No, I don't think there's any need to talk about that, because I think it's a silly. The morality thing, though, getting onto the thing, you see, your bottle or this glass is an object, right? Yeah. But morality is, and ideas about morality are much more intellectual. And I think what happens when we talk about child molestation, or, you know, I've heard this thing, you know, is it always wrong to torture babies for fun? You know, these things appeal to the emotions, and that's always a mistake. I think that is what's happening in your country at the moment. I think it is also happening in Europe. I think it happened in the 30s in Europe. Everybody appealed to emotions and fears, and morality was based on that. I think we've got to strip the emotions away and say, and I like the veil of ignorance thing, you know, that you sit everybody down in a room and say, how would you set up society? What rules would you have for governing a society, or moral rules? And for that, not knowing what position you would have it in the world, in that society, whether you would be the bottom, the top, male, female, black, white, gay, straight, disabled, whatever. And when it's like this business with children, if you've got more than one child, you know, and you get children, there's disputes. Well, he's got a bigger piece than I have, or whatever, you know, a bigger glass of thing. But you tell one of them to pour the drinks out, but the other one chooses first, and they'll measure the glass. Well, 2 glasses of drink will be exactly the same. It's a learnt and morality is learnt and developing, as far as I'm concerned, and it's also about personal responsibility.
Okay. You alluded to evolution earlier, and if I could quote Richard Dawkins, he would disagree with you on the sense that, now granted, I know that he does condemn other acts as actually morally right and wrong, but that's just evidence of an inconsistency in his worldview. But he will say that there's no good or bad, no right or wrong, nothing but pitiless indifference. That's his view, is what he'll say.
That's his view of what evolution and our position in the universe is.
Right, because
but what you've got to remember, on top of that, we've got cultural evolution. Which
okay, well, let's go back to what we do. Let's go back to what we do know. He said verbatim that good and bad do not exist. There is no evil. There is no right or wrong. Nothing but. So I disagree with that. The reason he says that is because obviously he believes in the unguided, blind, evolutionary paradigm, and the universe is just what we would expect to find. That right and wrong do not exist. Good and bad do not exist. I think that some things are right and wrong. So I would disagree with that.
I think our evolution, I agree with him in far as I extent our evolution. But I think when we form societies, we've got to learn to live together. And part of our evolution is this empathy we develop, because we cannot survive if we don't work together. Can we?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should obviously work together. But that's presupposing survival, which is exactly what evolution is. It's aimed at survival. It's not aimed at truth. What I want to know is there any truth value in saying that? And I don't mean to appeal to emotion. I'm trying to be very calm and not appeal to emotion, but I'm just trying to think of the most common example that you could ask anybody, and 99% of people will tell you that child molestation is really wrong. So I'm just trying to think of a good example. You brought up slavery. If we're going to say that it is really actually wrong, then we are affirming objective moral values and duties. And that's my argument. You can't say that morality is subjective. You can't say that morality is subjective and then say that somebody else had it wrong, because it's their subjective morality. It's their opinion. It's what works for them in that culture. You talked about survival and self-sacrifice even. You know, there's nothing commendable about self-sacrifice, but clearly that's not aimed at survival of the person that's sacrificing themselves. Why would there ever be a case
No,
where somebody?
but that's not
Why,
what evolution says, Chris.
evolution
Even,
doesn't say anything. Evolution does not say anything.
Well, I think if you take morality, you apply it to your nearest and dearest, and you move out. You move out. You know,
But why though?
Protection, because we live in groups. We have kin selection, which is, you know, if you look up kin selection in evolution and mirror neurons, you know, if I see you in pain, neurons fire in my brain, which tells me you're in pain, and I feel for you in pain. You feel for somebody who you see in pain, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, that is a genetic thing that's going on in your brain. That
Right.
it says that I empathize with that pain. That pain is bad. It's not healthy, or it's, you know, it's not good. I think we're getting a bit lost at the moment. I think if we go, why do we?
Well, because I do want to press you on. I think we need to. If you think that morality is subjective, then I mean, I really don't think that you believe. To be honest with you, I think you're just saying that, but I don't think you've really thought really about the implications. At least not from what I'm hearing, because what I'm hearing is you do believe that there are some things that are actually immoral, things that are
but
morally wrong.
Just because they're subjective doesn't mean they can't be morally wrong.
No, that's not what I said.
Yeah,
to
but
say something.
If you're right, let's take child molestation.
To say that it is actually wrong means that it's not wrong subjectively. It would be wrong objectively. That it really is wrong.
Right. I'll ask you a question.
It would have to be wrong objectively to apply across the board to all cultures, to all races, to all time, to all epochs of time, whether the different. You know, you can think. You know, you talked about empathizing for people in pain. Well, you know, Hitler didn't really care about the pain that he was, you know, afflicting on the Jews. And if morality is purely subjective, then we have no way to morally condemn what Hitler did as being morally wrong. We just don't.
No,
like you said,
that's a silly argument. I think that's why I say the argument between objective and subjective is a bit silly, because we have an objective set of rules that we've come to agree with as a society. We think murder is wrong. Okay?
We think. Yes. Do we think, or do we know? Do we think, or do we know?
I don't think that's important. We've come to the conclusion that we haven't
come to the conclusion. If morality is purely subjective, nothing is actually really wrong. Nothing is really right or wrong. And that's why I got to press you on this, because that is the implications of subjective. It ultimately leads to nihilism. I mean, just it does. If you want to be consistent, if you care to be consistent, subjective is no different than saying that nothing is really actually right or wrong. Just like Dawkins says, it doesn't exist. We're talking about the ontology, or the existence of moral values. Do they exist objectively, or do they not? If they exist subjectively, they do not. And I disagree with that. And I really think that you do too. 99% of people will have no problem saying that certain acts are morally wrong. And I'm not trying to appeal to emotion. I'm just trying to think of the best example that I can, that people might actually be able to think about it for a second and say, yeah, that really is wrong. That really is wrong. And the moment you do that, the moment you affirming objective morals.
But the problem I see with objective morals, as I said before, is that they set a rigidity, and they don't allow. I think, you see, morals are fluid. Morals are an evolving thing. I think our society in 2018 is more moral than the society in 1818.
Right, but according to what standard, though? If there's a
According
standard,
to the standard is, or the standard is the well-being of individuals within the society.
right? That's what you're saying. So that sounds like you would basically be a moral realist, and that would be like some sort of moral Platonism of objective morals. But if you're going to smuggle in a standard here, which you just did, and you're saying society's changing and we're closer now to the standard than we were over here or wherever, you're appealing to a standard. You're smuggling in a standard here.
No, because I think the standard
Your
can alter
standard
over.
is
No,
well-being, right?
No. The standard can alter over time. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What'd you say?
The standard can alter over time.
So a standard can change over time.
Yes.
Okay. So that's no different than saying that there is no ultimate standard.
Yes.
Okay. So there is nothing morally wrong with child molestation because
the present standard of our society says that is wrong. And I would include in that, if you want, an emotional example. I think seeing the way that children are brainwashed is child abuse.
Okay, I'm not sure what you're referring to exactly.
Well, if you look at the lectures that Ken Ham, lessons that Ken Ham has with children, you know, he gets them to repeat on rote these things, and that's brainwashing. I was brought up. One of the things my parents said to me when I was a bit older. One of the reasons we didn't get, you know, apart from the fact my father wasn't a believer, that we didn't get you baptized or anything else, that we thought that this is a choice you would have to make as an adult. And if you force that choice on a child, it's abuse.
Okay. Well, I'm not familiar with Ken Ham. I don't really follow his ministry. I mean, I know of him.
Yes.
I know he's a young Earth creationist, but I can't really speak to that. But
that's an that's an example. In the same way that
evolution,
evolution
being taught in the public schools, they've pushed God out of the public schools entirely. I can't speak for the UK, but here in America, we pushed God out of the public square. We've pushed God out of schools, and we're teaching evolution as fact. So is that not a form of indoctrination? They don't teach any type of other theory at all. It just is assumed that evolution is true. Is that not indoctrination?
No, because
Why?
I think I would go back to what I should have said earlier. I think everyone's entitled to their own beliefs, but they're not entitled to their own facts.
Right.
the
Evolution is
theory of
not.
the theory of evolution is a fact. If you
No, it's
ask,
not.
no, just
It's
a
not
minute.
a fact.
If you ask 99.999% of research biologists, they take it as fact. Leading edge biologists take that as a fact.
That's not even true.
The thing that can be argued about is the methods.
Well, that's referring to, but
So I presume you don't think we don't have a common ancestry. Every living thing on the planet has a common ancestry.
I don't know.
Well, that's what
I have
evolution.
no idea.
That's
No,
what
evolution says we do, but I have no way to know that. If you look at the evidence, I mean, we can look at the evidence, the fossil record, to say that we all share a common ancestor, and we evolved over millions of years by an unguided process that's completely natural, via natural selection, erected by Darwin himself, who was trying to come up with a way to get God out of the equation, because that is true. Wanted a natural way to account for the origin of species. So he comes up with this hypothesis, but there is absolutely no evidence to prove that via natural selection, without any unguided process there, that these new species have come up. Look at the evidence. If you look at the fossil record, it's not there either. To suggest that a fish and a human being share the same common ancestor, I mean, that's one thing, but that's only one kingdom of the vertebrates here. That's only one phylum up here. But to say that they shared a common ancestor, you would literally need millions, and I mean millions. And this is what biologists will tell you. You need millions of transitional fossils, or transitional species, rather. You would need millions, and they're just simply not there. Now, to say, and that's only one section of the vertebrae, but to say that a sponge that's down here, it's not a part of this same kingdom. A sponge and let's say a bat or whatever, a mammal and a sponge share a common ancestor, is even greater of a leap of faith. And we know scientifically that these drastic extrapolations from some sort of small changes within species, or maybe one or two transitional species, the evidence is just not there. So to say that all life came from this common ancestor is a terrible faith-based claim, I would say. It's not a fact. It's not a fact.
Right.
There's no way to verify that we all share.
Can I just say something? Neither of us are evolutionary biologists. We're not.
Right.
We're not academics. We're not the leading.
Well, then you should. You shouldn't go around saying that evolution is fact. Then
just a minute.
It's not fact.
Let me finish what I'm saying.
Okay.
We have to these days rely in almost every walk of life, whether it's your doctor or surgeon or physicist or anything, because knowledge has expanded enormously. And one of the things that people on the edge of, research and things, what they say is that the more they know tells them that there's how much they don't know. The trouble with the, if you like, so we have to rely on that expertise. And what I would ask on something like that, Jerry Coyne, C-O-Y-N-E, wrote a book called Why Evolution. I don't know if it's Why Evolution is True or just Evolution is True. It's not a very long book, but it goes into all the methods to prove why evolution is true. And he's also given lectures on YouTube, and he's a leading researcher in a particular field. And I think, I have to accept that he's an authority because he's peer reviewed. Science is a very, very disciplined peer review. They get things wrong, but it's scientists who correct the things that they get wrong. It's not laymen like you and me.
Okay.
And I think that's a very important thing to think about. I think.
Well,
do you guys want to start wrapping up a little bit?
Yes.
We're getting close to the 90-minute. Plus, I got a lot to add to this. Lot to add. Plus, there's some people that want to come in, but before they come in, like I said, I've got a lot to add. Let's just leave it at that real quick. But go ahead and kind of give your kind of closings here. Then I've been taking notes here, and then I'm gonna let loose a little bit.
I'm sure you are, Steve.
I've been restrained for too long. But go ahead and start wrapping it up. Chris, if you need to take care of you got a hungry baby or something, go ahead. Break. We don't mind.
No, my wife's over there with her.
Okay.
Do you want to wrap up first, Chris? I'll let you wrap up first.
Well, the only thing that I would say, we got into evolution, which I didn't think that this conversation was going to take a turn for that, but we have that evolution is fact, but he's not an expert on this, but he is convinced that it is fact. I'm not willing to concede to that. I'm not willing to say that. I don't know. Certainly, I don't believe so. I don't think that the evidence suggests that is the case. But that's really all I have to say about evolution. But I will say this: that even if evolution were true, then I would agree with Dawkins that good and bad really don't exist. There is no evil. You can't condemn anything as being morally right or wrong. It just this just is the way that it is. We're just advanced primates, and when a human being kills another human being, they haven't done anything morally wrong. Just like, when a cat kills a mouse, they haven't done anything more. That just is the way the universe is. Like Dawkins says, there's nothing good or bad, right or wrong, nothing but pitiless indifference. And I think this really is the issue that I have with atheism. If God does not exist, then that is the case. That is what we're left with. We're left with this subjectivism that really cannot account for anything being actually right or wrong. And I disagree with that. I think that everybody listening would also disagree with that when pressed on certain issues. And that's what I've tried to do here with Tim, is try to think of something that I know that he would affirm as being objectively wrong, or I should say really or actually wrong. But that just is to say that morality is objective. And I think that theism, although I didn't get a chance to get into that here in today's discussion. I think that theism is a more plausible account for the objective moral values and duties that we experience in the world.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't get onto theism. Agreed. We got sidetracked in, well, maybe I sidetracked or whoever, got sidetracked into evolution. But I think the important thing that came out of that is to realize that neither of us are experts. And we need to research, we need to read the people who are experts. With regard to morality, I think, because I take God out of the equation, that there is nothing out there. We are reliant on ourselves. We are a naturally cooperative species who has developed over the years to become more and more cooperative. And that's where our, if you like, our moral framework comes from, or ethical framework. I think we need to have other conversations about this, maybe inputs from other people, but I'm very willing to listen to people's points of view, as long as we are all prepared to maybe change in the light of evidence. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you guys. I hope that you guys had a little bit of correspondence between you guys, that or I should say conversation between you guys, that you learn from these things from each other. But like I said, I've been taking notes here, and I do got quite a bit of ad. I'll open this up when I'm done. That'll take about 3 hours. No, I won't be that long. I'll keep it probably within 20 minutes, but there is a lot to suss out here, and then I will open it up. I know a lot of people want to come in, but let me just start from the beginning here, because in my notes, that you said that people are objects. Well, you said people aren't objects, is what you said, right, Tim?
Yes.
Yeah. The thing with that is, have you heard of mereological nihilism? Mereological nihilism is the position that objects with proper parts don't exist. It is such that a human being is just a reorganization of already existing parts, like atoms, and atoms would be your primitives. So basically, objects don't exist because you're just assemblages of primitives, and therefore that objects of any kind, even the water bottle, does not exist. So when Chris is saying, this is objectively a water bottle that exists, well, not to a mereological nihilist. Right now, again, he had mentioned before some things lead to nihilist. That is one case that it would, but other cases it wouldn't. But any object, if you're gonna deny mereological nihilism, then I think that any object is an object. A person is an object. It is, you can say they, and that refers to something. You could use a reference to the reference. So there's nothing wrong with saying an object is a person, or a person is an object. We are an object if you don't accept mereological nihilism. On the thing of objective, subjective, and objectivity, both you guys, I think, got these words wrong, honestly. And we have in the Great Debate community the definitions on moral. You can go there. It's the Great Debate Wiki. But what it is, and I and other people wrote all these. So, and I had actual philosophers go over these. But an objective is moral content not influenced by personal feelings or opinions. It's mind independent, while subjective, moral content based on or influenced by personal feelings, taste, or opinions, or mind dependent. Now, here's the thing, which I don't think, Chris, you understood very well. There are moral facts if you are a cognitivist. In other words, if you think that a moral proposition can represent a moral fact, then you are a moral cognitivist. A moral non-cog would be somebody like an emotivist that thinks that propositions don't really exist. They won't actually represent any kind of moral fact, but they just represent an emotion, such as, like I say, stealing is wrong, is interpreted as motion-wise as boo, stealing is bad, right? Boo on stealing. There's also things like prescriptivism, which would be stealing is bad, don't steal. That's what it means. But those are non-cog positions. But for a cognitivist, they say that moral facts exist. That is both objective and subjectivist. Both of them say moral facts exist. The difference being that an objective moralist or a moral realist will say that those moral facts are independent of a person's individual feelings on that particular fact, while an objectivist would, a subjectivist say, no, those moral facts do exist, but they're contingent upon what I believe is immoral. So when you say that a subjectivist can't say what Hitler does is immoral, you're just wrong, because a moral subjectivist is based upon the fact that their morality is contingent upon what they believe to be immoral. Objective morality does exist unless you are a non-cognitivist or you're an error theorist, like I tend to error theory. I have no problem with objective morality. The problem is objective morality doesn't get you to a deity. That just means that there are some moral facts that are independently true, regardless if I believe them or not.
Do I get to respond?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Absolutely.
So you believe the morality is objective?
No, I'm an error theorist. I tend to error theorist.
Okay, so you're throwing around a lot of terms that I'm just unfamiliar with.
Okay, so, sure. Let me break it down.
It sounded like you supported morals being objective.
Unless you are a non-cognitivist, which means that you don't think a proposition can be something that is a moral fact. What a moral error theorist, but
you don't. So you think morals? You think the morality is objective, but you don't consider yourself.
Let me explain error theory. The moral error theory is moral nihilism, okay, which you said leads to nihilism, but I don't know if you knew what that meant. Moral nihilism is error theory. And all that means is that a proposition, moral proposition, all of them are false. So they do exist, but they're all untrue. Now, the reasons why they're untrue are kind of complicated, and I don't think people really want to go into it. But that's basically what an error theorist would say. They say, okay, moral propositions do represent true or false values, but they're always going to be false.
So I have to ask you.
So they deny objective morality.
Oh, do you deny objective morality?
I'm an error theorist. I don't think objective morality exists, but if I was an error theorist, sure, objective morality exists.
Okay, so do you think that morality is subjective?
Morality is both objective and subjective, but I, being an error theorist, I don't subscribe to an objective moral framework. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. To an objective moralist, to a moral realist, it doesn't matter what I think.
I'm just trying to understand your position here.
To an objective moralist, it doesn't matter what I think, right? I can say I think stealing is wrong. Somebody else can say stealing is not wrong, but an objective moralist would say, well, it doesn't matter what you two think. Well, it's objectively true.
I do care about what you think for the sake of our conversation. I'm not talking for the other people that exist out there. I want to know your position. But I think all moral
propositions are false. But that's that gets into a real technical thing. But I can try to explain it to you. But the problem is, it's going to confuse people. But
so
I can give it a shot if you want.
So it is false. That
yes, moral propositions are false to me. Now again, I just like that position.
That child molestation is morally wrong. You would say that that's false.
All moral propositions are false. That doesn't mean, though, we cannot say that you should not commit child abuse, right? That doesn't mean that, right? Even to a moral subjectivist, child molestation is wrong. It just means that it's wrong contingent upon what they believe to be right and wrong. And the term subjective is individual. The term relativism deals with cultures and societies most of the time. There is cultural subjectivism. But if I say that, oh, Hitler did this, that's not subjectivism. That's cultural relativism toward the culture of Germany. That's not subjectivism, though. Subjectivism still says it's moral facts, but it's contingent upon what we believe as individuals are true and false. Well, I think the problem is if you don't start off with propositions, all this stuff makes no sense. Whenever you get into the objective subjective conversation, this is why they get bogged down, because I've seen time and time again they don't start with a proposition and what it means to be true or false.
Well, I tried to start with the proposition with you, but your position is really confusing. I would not deny that morals aren't relative to some people or some cultures. That's the difference between being absolute and relative. Which I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about whether it is objectively real or not, whether it exists or not.
Yeah, more realists will say that ontologically these facts are true ontologically, right?
Right.
Okay, so but what the reason the reason I tend to do moral nihilism is basically, and again, some people agree with me, some people don't. I know that Darwin's greatest hits is a moral nihilist, but like Ozzy's not. So it's all, to me, personal. What you think the best way to describe a moral theory is.
Okay.
People can be a non-convenists if they want to. It's up to the person how they want to view morals. I just think there's a problem what's called an instantiation problem. That if I say stealing is wrong, that entails, and this is Mackey's argument, right? Mackey is the one that came up with error theory, that there is no property called stealing. And what is stealing? What is that property? It's not like a universal. It's not like we say the property of being round, or what's the property of a sphere? Well, it's round, right? That's a property. It's an intrinsic property that we know that all spheres have. But wrongness is not a property. And so you cannot instantiate the word wrongness into stealing is wrong. Therefore, there's an error that's created. And so that proposition, stealing wrong, is an error.
Well, we didn't get into that. We didn't get into any of that at all. So, I mean, I can appreciate that contribution, but I just want to make sure that I'm clear. You're saying morality is subjective and objective, correct?
It could be either one. Yeah, I mean, again, you
said like 3 or 4 different things here. You're just confusing me.
Because the reason you're being confused
we can move on. We can move on.
The reason you're being confused is these are not easy topics, and I think the whole discussion between objective and subjective has been bogged down for hundreds of years in terminology that even philosophers themselves use differently amongst themselves. And I really think that anybody who's listening to this, if you guys want to learn about this, go watch Sisyphus Redeemed on video. It's like, I don't know, 70 years old, on objective morality. He is spot on, I think, and he has his PhD now. But he basically says the whole distinction is meaningless any longer. It's kind of like the analytic synthetic distinction. It's kind of a meaningless thing. But I think the problem you have, Chris, is that you think that, one, atheists can't have objective morals. That's ridiculous.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
I did not say that. That's ridiculous that you're going to say that.
So you agree you don't need a God to have objective morality then?
Well, you can be a atheistic moral Platonist and believe that objective morals exist. So I think there are people that do ascribe themselves as just that.
Okay, so again,
but what I want to know is what is the best account for that, and that's a different argument.
Well, that's a grounding problem.
Yeah, exactly. Which I would say that
Harris would do it in society.
But I would never say that atheists are immoral or.
That's not what I said. Can an atheist subscribe?
I'm not saying you said that. I'm not saying you said that.
Can atheists subscribe to objective morality?
Yes.
Do they need a God to do that?
There are some who need a God, correct?
Well, if they need a God, they're not, and they believe in God, they're not atheists any longer.
You're at this point. I think I most certainly think that you need a God to ground it, but that's another conversation. But I think that there are.
How does an atheist ground
atheistic moral? Well, they ground it, like I said, atheistic moral Platonism, which they ground these moral values as well as evil in these abstract objects. That's one way. Now there might be other ways, but whereas the Christian, they ground the good in God. And everything is measured, how well it measures up.
Can I ask you how many atheists you ever ran into that actually try to ground it in moral Platonism? Because I know what it is, but I've never found one. So how many of these atheists are actually doing that?
Well, I would have to refer to people in academia. I don't know any of my personal friends or anything.
Okay.
But like, William Lane Craig's debate with Eric Wielenberg, He's basically a moral Platonist.
Okay, well, William and Craig's definition of moral realism is something that I hold to. The way he defines moral realism is basically that there are more values they're bind to everybody, regardless if anybody believes them or not, which is actually kind of true. But I think it's kind of a lackluster. Yeah, but that's kind of a lackluster definition. The reason
that is what I said, though, at the outset of the conversation. So I'm not confused on these terms. I can appreciate other resources that you can refer me, but
okay, so you do agree then that a subjectivist believes moral facts exist, therefore they can condemn something as wrong, like child molestation, without having objective morality. Then you agree with that?
No, not really.
Well, then I don't think you understand the terms, because a subjective moralist will say it is wrong.
Steve, why do you keep jumping around to other conversation? We were just talking objectively, and now you're asking me subjectively, and then you asked me about can atheists ground moral values, and so we can move. Isn't coming on here to debate you on these topics, but
well, I'm not trying to. I'm actually trying to get you. I'm asking you these questions so you kind of see the problems in your argumentation, because there's a plethora of them.
To say I agree with the way that you define subjective morality. I agree with that.
Okay.
And you said that it's not based on people's feelings, basically, or it is based on people's feelings if it's subjective. Yeah, yes, basically. and that's the way I defined it at the outset of our discussion.
I'll get on Tim a little bit then for a second. So Tim,
Yes.
Do you think that atheists need to subscribe to the position that objective morality doesn't exist?
Doesn't exist.
Yeah, because I notice a lot of atheists tend to have this narrative that they jump on this bandwagon that morals is subjective, and I've actually, talked to Cosmic Skeptic on his argument that I in Rational Morality Rules, and Dr. Malpass and a few other people thinks is completely wrong, because he's doing what's called subjective reductionism. He's basically kind of did what you did and says that, look, everything boils down to subjective experience, which in some ways is true, but that's not what they mean by an objective moral. An objective moral is something that, let's try to explain an objective fact first. If I said to you, Tim, if you want to win a race, you ought to run fast, right? A foot race. That's an objective fact. Doesn't matter whether you agree with it or I don't agree with it. That's a true statement. Now, if I don't want to win the race, then I don't have to run fast. But objectively, if my goal is to win the race, I ought to run fast. That's just a true statement, right?
Yeah.
It's independently true no matter what anybody believes. A moral realist will say there are moral facts that are similar to that. That's it. That are true independently of what anybody believes. Now, Richard Carrier and Sam Harris make very good arguments for why objective morality exists. So I would suggest maybe looking at Richard Carrier's work and Sam Harris's work, because there's nothing wrong with an atheist being an objective moralist. It doesn't. Atheism and objective. It's really weird when you have discussion that's supposed to be on theism and atheism, and it gets to topics like morality and it gets to topics like evolution, when it has nothing to do with either of them. Morality has nothing to do with atheism. Period. It just doesn't. I don't know why they keep on being this intrinsic thing between the two. I don't get it.
No, I don't either.
I mean, atheists can be morals. Atheists can be moral, right? Everybody agrees with that, don't you? You agree with that, Chris? Right?
Yeah, I said so, and I believe that there are atheists that subscribe to objective morality, and I agree with what you told Tim. He doesn't need to subscribe to subjective morality just because he's an atheist, and I agree with that. But the conversation, didn't really go anywhere from there because, well, we couldn't agree on terms, and we on subjective versus objective. And
okay,
but I would say that if I were talking to an atheist, and I didn't know that prior to coming in to this chat, if Tim said that he believed that morality was objective, then I would agree with him there, but I would obviously disagree with what's the best grounding for that, and I would try to give a case for theism and hear his case for whatever he might propose.
Okay.
But obviously, that wasn't the.
Yeah, no, sure, and I get that. The reason I was confused is because you said something along the lines that a person, if they subscribe to subjectivism, can't say what Hitler did was wrong, and you did say that, did you not? and that's just
I
nonsense.
said, well, no, I said they can't say what he did was really wrong.
Yeah, they can. Absolutely, they can.
How can
I
they?
don't, because they're subjectivist. They're the moral fact would be
I
that.
don't. Yeah, don't put. I mean, I don't know if I need to turn you down or something, but I feel like you're screaming in my ear when you. I don't understand how. You just said that it's not based as subjectivist is not based on feelings or what anybody thinks.
But
right?
the moral fact would be that Hitler killing people would be a moral fact that a subjectivist would say was wrong. Right? That's it. Moral facts exist if a subjectivist and objectivist look at something and say, yeah, we both agree a moral fact exists. The difference is an objectivist will say the moral fact is not dependent upon independent or individual feelings. But a subjectivist would say, no, it is dependent upon individual things. And I think it's a mixture, right? The only reason I don't subscribe to an objective moral framework is I do kind of like error theory, although I'm not married to it, by the way. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's nothing that I will hill I will die on. I find it to be, it makes sense. But do you get the point that you keep on thinking that an atheist or a subjectivist can't say something's wrong, like child molestation?
No,
of course they can.
No, clearly they say that it's wrong. But I want to know, is it really wrong? You even said that.
Yes, it's really wrong because of subjectivism. But it's really wrong to them. It's just not objectively wrong.
I'm not talking about to them. I'm not talking about to them.
But that's what it means, Chris.
I know that. I know that's what it means. I understand what it means. That's what it means to be subjective.
Yes. So what's the issue then?
Someone can say 1 + 1 is 3. That doesn't mean it really is 3.
Exactly.
Somebody says math is subjective would say that it is to them. It is 3 to them. They're just making up their own math, right? So that's because of the way they feel or the way they want to think about it.
Yeah, a moral objectivist would say, let's say with math, like 1 + 1 = 3. The objectivist would say, you look at math, 1 + 1 = 2. It doesn't matter whether you think it's 3, it's still 2. That's objective fact. But the subjectivist would say, no, 1 + 1 = 3 because I want it to be that way. My belief is that it is that case. But the objectivist said, well, you're wrong. That's the only difference is.
Right,
but
right.
They both agree.
But only one person's right.
Well, because
it either is 3 or it's
objectively
2.
Speaking, only one thing is right. But a subjectivist doesn't care if it's objectively true. They just care if it's morally wrong.
But I do care.
But if there is no objective morality, then there is no way to determine what is right or wrong.
So you're saying so people don't really care whether what Hitler did was actually wrong or not.
That's not what I said.
I mean, I'm trying to use that as an example. You did say that they don't care
what Hitler
did. They just think or feel.
No, they don't. There's no way for a subjectivist to say, I can independently go verify this objectively, right? You can do it in math. Math is objective. But a subjectivist will say morals are not objective. You cannot independently verify what is right or wrong. Right? And there's something to be said for that. You can't. Even if you invoke a deity, it doesn't get you out of that problem. Because then you have the problem with the Euthyphro dilemma, right? Because if God is actually telling you, let's say you invoke divine command theory, which is ethical subjectivism, because it's based upon the mind of God, it's still not objective in that way. It's still an objective framework to us, right? Divine command theory is objective to us because whatever God says, we follow, but it's still contingent upon what he believes, what he thinks. That's a mind, if you want to call it that. So if there's objective morality that comes from God, it's contingent on what he says is objective morality, unless you choose the other horn of the Euthyphro dilemma. And then there's a problem there because then your God is no longer all powerful because there's something of higher value that he has to abide by.
I have to say, I'm really surprised that you bring up the Euthyphro dilemma.
Why?
I mean, because I don't really ever hear sophisticated scholars and philosophers bringing that up as.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. I hear.
Euthyphro dilemma is a very old problem.
No, I know, really, but it's a false dilemma.
It's not.
You think it's not.
How is it a false dilemma?
Because there's other options.
What are the other options?
One option is that God wills it because he is good. I mean,
that's the first horn.
No, it's not.
It's not. The two things.
Is it good because God is it good because God wills something, or does God will it because it's good, and it's because he's good. It's a false dilemma.
No, okay. First of all, the youthful dilemma is not a false dilemma. The way okay, let me finish. The way the youthful dilemma is phrased is that it's either going to be one of two horns that you can pick. Okay, the first horn, God commands what is good, and this actually goes back to Plato and the gods are pious, right? Do they command what is good because of the piety, or is it because the piety they command what is good? But if a God is good and he says, I command this to be the case, right? That's one horn of the youthful dilemma. God commands what is good. Okay, so he decides. In that case, it's arbitrary. That's the problem with that particular horn. It's arbitrary because he can decide what is good and what is bad. Now, the other horn is that God commands what is good because it is good, which means that there's a value of goodness that extends beyond God that God has to abide by, which means he's not all powerful. That's the two horns of the dilemma. Either way you get to a problem between arbitrariness and omnipotent. So I don't know where you get this idea that the youthful dilemma is not used in philosophy, because it is constantly brought up.
I said I don't hear sophisticated scholars using it.
I know a lot of PhDs in philosophy, and they talk about the youthful dilemma.
All I see is people on the internet, on YouTube and Reddit and Twitter and that sort of thing, talking about this. I don't really see sophisticated scholars.
Well, maybe you don't listen to a lot of them, because I do listen to sophisticated.
Okay, well, I'm just surprised
can I make
that you would bring up the youthful.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, Tim.
Chris, I think it would help when this goes up, conversation goes up, if you listen to what Steve says and think about what Steve has said, because that's what I will do with what he's got to say to me, because one needs to think about it, not be too defensive, because when somebody says something that you would disagree with, you feel you could backed into a corner.
Yeah, and keep in mind, look, I'm a layperson, and everybody knows this, but I got to tell you, I've been doing this a very long time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do know these arguments pretty damn well, and we talk about them quite frequently. So I'm not a novice when it comes to this type of stuff, but I'm, obviously a layperson, but I got to tell you, I deal with a lot of experts, and when they correct me on minor stuff, I get corrected, and I go, okay, I won't do that again. So I've learned from my mistakes. So I've honed this down pretty well anymore. But let's kind of move on a little bit to a couple other things, and then we get people in here. Let's talk about evolution for a second, because Chris, are you a young Earth creationist?
No.
Okay.
And let me say this real quick. I'm not going to be able to carry this on for too much longer, so I don't know what your plans are for getting people in, but probably when people start coming, I might have to get out of here.
No problem. So let's just kind of get to this quickly then. You said that evolution isn't a fact. That's just blatantly wrong. It is a fact, absolute fact. There is no question about it. There's no debate about it. There's no discussion about it. Evolution happens, right? And evolution is defined to be the change of allelic frequency in a given population of species from one generation to the next generation over time. That happens. So when people say evolution is a fact, that is what they're referring to.
Not always.
Well, anybody that knows biology, when they say evolution is a fact, that is what they're referring to. Okay, they're not talking about common descent. They're talking about the fact that evolution occurs in a population because you have change of genes. Okay.
Well, we were talking about common ancestor, natural selection, in which Tim said was a fact, and that is not a fact
as well. No, absolutely, that is a fact as well. Well,
there is no scientific textbook that will ever repeat what you're saying here.
I beg to differ with you.
It is not a fact.
Let me explain to you how
that's a philosophical claim.
Well, it's not a philosophical claim. It is a
yes, it is.
Okay, Chris, let me explain this to you. Do you know what vertical?
No.
Well, hang on. Do you know what vertical gene transmission is?
No.
Okay, vertical gene transmission is how we give our genes. We pass them on to future generations. Okay, like through the gene line, the germ line, right? So we pass on our things. So you are related by common ancestry with your cousin to your great grandparents, right? Your grandparents and your great grandparents, you share common ancestry. You go back further, you have great grandparents. The common ancestry will go back between plants and animals. It'll go back all the way back to the first domain, between
Whoa.
archaea, bacteria, and eukaryotes. So we can trace that back to stromatolites 3.9 billion years ago. We know by phylogenetics, we know by proteomics, we know by genomic analysis, we know by molecular clocks, we know by enzymatic conservations of the proteins. We know all these different things, which is kind of proteomics, but we know by multiple lines of conciliation that these things are true, that we are related back to our first domain, to what's called LUCA, the last universal common ancestor. This is not speculation. This is not hypothesis. This is a fact. And if you don't think that's true, then you really need to go take some biology courses. Because I'm not.
No, I don't really. I really don't need to do anything. If it was such a fact, then why do you have people to believe in God?
What does God have to do with anything?
What
does God have to do with anything I just said? What I just said is science, not theology.
The way that you defined evolution was saying not common ancestry, not any of that, and then you start talking about common ancestry.
You just started talking about common ancestry.
No, I didn't. I said Tim and I were talking about that.
So I said, okay, let's talk about common ancestry.
The way that you define, okay, look, Steve, the way that you defined evolution, I have no problem with. If you want to, if you want to say that the science textbooks tell us that it is absolute fact, then I'm fine with that. But there is no scientific fact. There is no scientific book that would say that we share a common ancestor and we have evolved via natural selection, unguided, blindly, like
no one ever said that.
But there are not
unguided.
People,
evolution is not unguided.
Hold on, listen to me. People,
you're making a fundamental mistake here.
No, I'm not. I'm telling you what evolution is not.
Well, first of all, you haven't ever taken biology, so I don't think that you really.
I have taken biology.
Okay, so
why do you assume all these?
Okay,
why do you assume all this about?
You seem to have very fundamental understanding.
No, what you said. If you want to define evolution, people define evolution differently, and so I don't take issue with a lot of different definitions.
Okay,
but I do take issue with the theory that we shared common ancestor, evolved via natural selection.
Do you know what the theory of evolution is? What's the theory of evolution, Chris?
That things change over time.
No, the theory of evolution is the modern evolutionary synthesis combined with descent with modification. That is the theory of evolution. Descent with modification implies common ancestry, which is a fact because a theory must be confirmed. So what you're saying is blatantly wrong.
No, what you're saying you will never. What you're saying you will never find in a scientific textbook.
Yes, you will.
Yes, you absolutely will, because I've actually read them.
He's pulled it up from a scientific textbook, but I do have a question. Chris, you're having an issue with evolutionary theory, and that's, none of us are biologists. I've already seen that said earlier here from everybody. That's fine. What is our closest common ancestor in the ape line?
Richard Dawkins is a chimp.
No, he did not say it was a chimp, actually.
I believe it's a bonobo.
It's a bonobo. Yes, you're right, Steve. It's a bonobo.
Okay, well, whatever.
We left the chimp line hundreds of thousands of years ago with chimp human last common ancestor. That's older than the bonobo, the bonobo stretch,
which would have been Pan prior, they called it.
Yes. So that's the first thing. So I asked that because I wanted to see how much of the actual theory that you take issue with you understand. Now that we've established that the answer is nil, we can continue.
Yeah, and again, you cannot say these things are wrong, Chris, without at least a very basic understanding. Let me finish. No, I disagree.
No, you have. I already established it.
I don't. If you don't know what a closest ancestor is, or where the divergence, but do you know what hominidae is? I mean, do you know what a great ape is or a lesser ape?
Yes.
Okay, what are we?
We are part of the great apes, apparently.
Yes. Okay. So
every taxonomic phenotypical thing.
Okay. Look,
we share all.
I'm sorry, I do have to get off here. I tried to say that earlier, but
yeah, no problem.
Do you have a question for me and I can answer, and then maybe get off here, or otherwise I can just.
I don't really have a question. What I would highly recommend, and I'm not trying to bad you. I get people out of young Earth creationism. I know you're not young Earther, but I do it by letting them kind of destroy their own arguments, right? And I think the problem is here, you make these claims about biology without having a real fundamental understanding of what common ancestry entails. Because if you actually, I'll give you some books to recommend. Go look at, and one of them was like Why Evolution is True by Coyne is very good. Or go look at Neil Shubin's book, Your Inner Fish, because you said, oh, how do you know you're related to fish? That book explains it in detail to the point it even shows how the Hox genes arose from what's called the organizer reason. We have undisputed evidence that we are related to fish and that we are monophyletically still fish. Matter of fact, that was confirmed easily multiple times over. But do you know that Neil Shubin actually went out and said, where would I find a transitional fossil that had this parameters, these lobes, these types of things phenotypically? What strata would I go find it at and what location? He went there, Nova Scotia, boom. Was it Nova Scotia? I think it was Nova Scotia, but if somebody, whatever island was up there, I can't remember the name of it. But he not only found one, they found many, right? And it's all documented. He used the theory of common ancestry to pinpoint the location of a transitional fossil. That is validation that the theory is correct. Would you not say so?
No.
How would you not? Was it just random luck that he found the exact fossil transition he was looking for with exact
what exact fossil are we talking about?
Tiktaalik.
Because what I've heard
Tiktaalik.
What I've heard evolutionary biologists say is that to show that to have evidence to have fossil evidence to suggest that a bat and a whale, okay, we're talking about the mammals here, at least I think we are, a bat and a whale share a common ancestor. We would literally have to have millions of transitional fossils.
Why?
And
why do you need millions?
Evolutionary biologists say.
No, in fact, real quick, then I'll give it to you, service, I promise.
Sure.
Let me tell you this. You don't need a single freaking fossil to validate common ancestry. If no fossil was ever found, we would have overwhelming evidence just on the genomics alone, and ERVs, as somebody points out, ERVs was a very good evidence. By the genes themselves, we can validate common ancestry. We don't even need fossils. So what you just said, no biologist I could think of would ever say. And I know quite a few biologists.
They have said that. They have said that. So So if I can give you these names that I don't have off the top of my head, would I win this argument? If I could give you names?
I think you're misunderstanding what they probably said more than anything else.
Exactly. All right. That's enough of this conversation.
Yeah,
I do appreciate you having me on, Steve.
Okay.
But
I will talk to you again, Chris. Okay.
All right, Tim. Have a good day.
Thanks,
man.
Chris.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, Chris.
All right. Thank you.
No.
Sorry, frustrated and serious. I thought he was going to stay online, but I honestly, I had it. That was.
I was just going to point out one thing. If he wants archaeological evidence, like if the only thing that he'll accept as evidence is bones, because that's what it's sounding like. The only thing he'll accept as evidence is bones. He's ignoring genetics. He's ignoring taxonomics. He's ignoring everything. He just wants bones. Okay, cool. You want evidence of a common ancestor between a whale and a bat? Vestigial hind bones.
Yeah, I mean,
whales
look at the phalanges. Look at the hands.
Like
they're the same bones.
It's if the only evidence he'll have is bones, then we can point to vestigial ones that are still there now. We don't even go into the archaeological record for it. So no, I the entirety. Me and Frustrated were on my Discord yelling, so we could hear each other yell instead of screaming at the wall.
Yeah, I think Mr. Sirius in the live chat says this, and I couldn't agree more. He said, quote, win the conversation. It's never about learning. And that's what I've noticed too. Look at, again, people can say, Steve, you're a layperson, you don't know biology, you don't know philosophy, and that's their opinion. That's fine. Look at, I have tried to learn these things over many, many years, and I'm still a layperson, but I don't have many experts saying, Steve, you don't know what you're talking about. Matter of fact, I've never had an expert tell me I don't, and no clue that what I'm talking about. Well, the closest I came today was I did some weird math stuff, and Rachel Traylor, Dr. Rachel Traylor was like, Steve, I think you're kind of hosed on this. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Let me back this up a little bit. But the point is that what I'm trying to tell him is validatable. He learned this stuff, right? But he's never bothered to actually read any of the actual information. He just makes these assertions that they're not in the books, not in the literature. Well, that's just wrong.
No, and not to mention, whenever you gave him a definition that came straight out of a textbook, he said that's not from a textbook. That's why I immediately called him out on quote mining. I don't even need to know where he pulled it from to know that he was quote mining.
Which is why I was also going to say that if he doesn't believe that, then he can just go on Berkeley and go to Evolution 101, and one of the very first things explains exactly what evolution is.
Not to mention, on top of that, when he grunted in frustration the minute you suggested a few books for him to read. Now, I'm just going to add a quick juxtaposition for you. So you remember when me, you, and SJ were on your channel before, right, Steve?
Sure.
Wow. Okay. What was the one book she recommended to me? Was Hugh Ross's Improbable Planet, right?
Yeah, and which I've read.
And what happened during the stream? I bought the book during the stream.
Did you tell Hugh that?
I have not told Hugh that, no.
Well,
But
I'll tell you what. Tweet when you get a chance. Tweet that up to Hugh. Tag me on it as well, because I recommended that book too, so you can let him know. The reason I recommend Improbable Planet because the science in Improbable Planet is actually really good. I mean, because he's an astrophysicist, right? He's not an idiot, and he gets the science. I think, from my layperson's experience, pretty damn well. And I've read books on astronomy and astrophysics, but he only brings God into the very end, right? He makes a conclusionary argument based upon the fact that it's very improbable we should have survived all these different catastrophic events, which is not, I mean, in and of itself is not like an irrational argument. It's one of those things here. I'm positing this, you can accept it or you don't, but it's not something that is completely fallacious. It's kind of like maybe a fine-tuning argument most. We are here because the universe is fine-tuned. We are here because the conditions are for the last big 5 wipeout events. These huge events that destroyed most of life. We've survived them. Well, something has survived that eventually led to us, right? So he makes a argument that way. But the science in the book is right. Would you agree?
I haven't managed to read the entire thing yet, but from what you've said, that is the case. I've never heard somebody say that is not the case. So until I've read it myself completely, that's where I'm going to have to sit. I still haven't even read Carrier's book completely, but I'm like halfway through it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's I've seen condemned Hugh's book as being scientifically inaccurate. I mean, he talks about the late bombardment period. He talks about like the extinction of level events and things of that nature. But
it bothers me when somebody even if they don't accept that you've demonstrated that they're wrong, which I think Chris was demonstrating. I actually have a video about Chris on my channel.
I've never talked to the guy, and I know I can come off a little bit over the top when on some people, but when I hear that level of, hey, I'm going to tell you the way it is when I won't even actually read anything, it's frustrating.
And that bothers me. I think the proper response, even if you don't have a lot of, if somebody says, hey, could you read this material so you can understand this position a little better? The proper response is always, okay, I'll go ahead and read that material. If I'm taking the time out of my day to make this argument, I can probably take the time out of my day to read a freaking book.
Yeah, I think.
But is it a reflection of your education system?
Well, I mean, maybe. I mean, I gotta admit, our educational system could use improvement.
I grew up in a so just I know that our education system is bunk. I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
But there's a tiny bit of back. Oscar, I've never spoken with you before.
It's Tim.
Tim. I just see Oscar as the
Tim.
Oh yeah. Oscar's the name of my cat.
Gotcha. You want to be named as your cat? I'll gladly do that. But so
I'm afraid he's dead now.
Well, that's unfortunate. Please don't die. That's bad. But I grew up in a Christian private school, and I was taught young Earth creationism at an academic level, so it was ingrained into me, from the very beginning. So I can say that yes, it's probably a failure of the education system, but I'm not experienced with the early public education system because I wasn't in it. I was in something that arguably was worse.
Yes. Or maybe it's not the system. What made you a critical thinker?
Two things. One, my grandpa was a theist, so he wasn't like the out group. And I was a KJV onlyist, and he said, let's have this conversation again in a decade. He just gave me 10 years to reflect on it, because to me that was a lot of time, but to him that was, a percentage of his life.
Yeah.
He brought up the conversation again 10 years later and said, are you a KJV onlyist anymore? And I was like, no, because in those 10 years, I had actually learned a little bit about how the KJV came around and went, wait a minute, this this version was penned in 1611.
It's weird in the later versions are considered to be the canon, vice the earlier version, right? Usually in critical, what is it called? A textual criticism. You always go to the earlier manuscripts, right?
You would go to the earlier manuscripts, and then when I researched further and found that even the Greek manuscripts they used, they based it off of ones from the mid and late 1500s. So even that's still really far removed. So I was like, I'm not a KJV onlyist anymore. That was the first step. The second step, when I actually got to high school. The school that I was in before, the private school, was non-denominational. So they taught that everybody who was a Christian, whether you were Catholic, Mormon, JW, doesn't matter. You were Christian. So when I met my Catholic science teacher, and he subscribed to the theory of evolution, that was like a culture shock thing for me. Because for me, I was always taught that it's wrong, it's evil, etc. And yet here's a Christian who subscribes to it, and he's teaching a class on it. About a year in his class pretty much made me go, maybe I was taught wrong. And those were the first two major steps. And I think the only reason they worked is because they happened from people that I considered to be part of my in-group. They were both Christians, and they helped me learn to not be so narrow-minded. And then from that, I was able to break out more and then completely leave that theology on its own, not saying it's good or bad, but I was able to because the first people who gave me those stepping stones were part of the in-group.
Well, Tim, you've talked to Oscar before. Now, he says he's not a young creationist, but clearly he doesn't accept common ancestry. So how does he think all this works? Is he a gap creationist, an old earth creationist, or where does his beliefs fall?
I'm not sure.
I didn't get a chance to ask him, so because it was very he kept interrupting, and it's very difficult to get a thought out and explain something when every 2 seconds. And I was a little bit of lag on his end, but he just would not let me finish my train of thought.
What I find difficult, Steve, is that people like Chris, and he's not unique, is he?
No, it's cookie cutter. Cookie cutter script, man. Seriously, say in the live chat, it's a script. It's all these things are. They're cookie cutters. Why do you think we get so good at this? Because most of the time they don't bring anything new to the table.
No, you're just refuting the old argument.
Yeah, I mean, Cyrus and I could do this blindfolded at this point, deaf, dumb, and drunk, because we've heard this all before, right? There's nothing new in any of this.
Yes, but I think what people like Chris come to the table convinced that they are right.
Mm-hmm.
That is the problem, isn't it?
Yes. And the difference is it's okay to be convinced that you're right. That doesn't mean you believe something. If you believe something, you're convinced. Nothing wrong with being beliefs. The difference is Cyrus and I, we know where to go to find the validation of what we're talking about. Right? It's like this was like the other day on Twitter. I had put something out about how much the church has spent with these scandals, right? And you only get 280 characters, right? So you can only put so much. And of course, I want to put what I want out rather than waste it with big old links. But Vice Rhino goes, well, do you have the link for that? I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I want the citation, and he's fully able to do that. I love Vice Rhino. Yes. But then I gave him the citation because I knew where to get it. Right? I didn't put out information without just pulling out my ass. Right?
It's like the guy who I just did a 3-part series called Discount Hoven. This guy who is like a Ken. You've actually watched the Discount Hoven series?
Yes.
I looked at your source video for that, and his entire YouTube channel's name is "What is your worldview? Creationism or evolutionism?"
Oh, that's just so
cringy. Because evolution's not a worldview; it's just a scientific theory. But
yeah.
anyway,
I don't subscribe to worldviews. Like I've told people again, I think worldviews are bumpkiss because
and
that's one worldview, but that's not even something I think is quantifiable.
But like when he pointed out that evolutionary theory is true, and they use because evolutionary theory is taught in schools, that's why we're getting more school shootings. So I was like, you know what? Just for giggles, let me look up the statistics for violent crimes in the United States, which would include that. Let's look at the statistics for that in the United States. Let's see how that pans out. Oh, whoa, holy shit. It looks like the violent crimes in the United States have done nothing but go down since the 90s. And I provided the article for that, too, in my
citation.
You can always blame something for anything, right? I mean, there are people now still blaming the church scandal on Atheist. Wrap your head around that one. I don't get it.
Right?
I just okay, but no, evolution doesn't cause the demise of society. Evolution is a biological fact. Accept it. It's not going to change. It's kind of like flat Earth is wrong. I don't give a crap what you say. It's wrong. These are nothing that are up for discussion or debate. Although we like to talk about them because it's usually for entertainment value and mockery. But there is no reasonable way you could debate something like flat Earth or young Earth creationism or evolution doesn't happen. These are just not debatable topics.
Oh, SJ just in the chat is challenging you. She says, school shootings have gone up through copycats.
But school shootings are not. You can't say school shootings are due to teaching evolution because that's just not a correlation you can make. That's just absurd. And he seems to think that because evolution, if it was true, then you could not have morality. And it's like, no, the reason we have morality is because we are moral agents. That's, I think, what he doesn't understand. Morality is not contingent upon a deity. Morality, the only necessary thing for morality, I think, and I could be wrong on this if somebody wants to correct me, is that you have to have moral agents.
I think that's pretty much, if you have agency, you have the capacity for morality in whatever standard you adhere to. If you adhere to objectivism, anti-realism, it doesn't matter. If you're an agent, you can ascribe to a standard. If you can subscribe to a standard of any kind, even if it's not even well defined, then you have some standard of morality you can use, and that only comes from being an agent, not being an automaton.
Yeah, exactly. And moreover, when we say we're objects of moral concern, that means that we as a society, and that's why I think morals come from evolution, they come from society, because we have learned there's certain things you don't do in society if you want a healthy society. So we have contractually said with each other, this is something that we do not think is a moral act, right? Because it's not beneficial to society or just something that shocks the conscience as a society, right? So he thinks that because if it's just contingent upon evolution, that there's no framework you're going to have to say something is wrong. And I believe that he did say that. I think I called him out on it, but then he kind of changed the story. But I was pretty sure that he said something along those lines. And look, you can have an objective moral framework. You can have a subjective moral framework. It's completely up to you how you want to view morality. And he couldn't understand me putting forth the error theorist position. Now, I'm sorry. If you don't know what all these if you don't know what the difference between a cognitivist and a non-cognitivist, honestly, again, I really want your opinion on this, guys, and especially Sirs, but if somebody, and again, I keep reiterating this, I'm a layperson, but do you not agree that if you're going to have conversations about morality, the most basic things you should understand is what a proposition is, and if that proposition is truth apt or not, or if you think it's that you're a cognitivist or a non-cognitivist. I mean, before you even get into moral realism, shouldn't you start with something basic like that?
During the entire conversation, I had the Oxford. There's an entire paper they have on there for moral anti-realism and the different kinds. That's why I yelled out. I was like, "There's 5."
Oh, I think I've asked you that question before. I've had a deja vu. I think I've asked you this.
I pulled that stuff up as I was listening to the conversation before I typed anything into the chat.
Tim, would you agree on that? I mean, Tim, again, you're jumping into this, and I think that's great, by the way. And the only way you're going to get better is by doing it and by learning from mistakes, right? So I applaud you because you are willing to accept criticism, you're willing to accept reproof, and you want to learn. That, to me, is everything that the Great Debate community stands for.
Yes, my philosophy in life is the day I stop learning or stop being willing to learn, I might as well, pop my clogs, as we say.
I love learning. It's just the problem is that I have a short attention span these days. So I used to have so much ability to brute memorize things, and I lack that ability any longer. But
yes, I do. My problem.
It's hard because I'm sitting in a chair for hours on end. I got a million things to do. I'm working on podcasts. We're working on getting guests. It's a lot of work to do all this stuff. People that say that when you're on YouTube full time isn't a job, I don't think they've necessarily put the work in to see how much work it actually takes.
I stayed up till 7:30 in the morning editing my last episode,
and I know he does. I've talked to him at 7:30 in the morning. I've talked to Sir. I'm like, what the fuck are you still doing up? He's like, oh, I'm still finishing my video. It's a lot of work.
I'm freaking editing still. I can't sleep.
But then they demonetize you. You're like, what What? All this work and I get demonetized? Are you seriously, YouTube? And then they come back later. Oh, we've reviewed it. It's okay. Okay,
by the way, I
thanks.
just wanted to point out, I've been looking up the statistics for school shootings from '92 up to present day. It looks like they actually have gone down too. It's not just violent crimes.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers. But,
Yeah,
I figured once SJ called me out on it, I figured I'd go ahead and fact check myself more specifically just to see, and it still holds from what.
Yeah, but you notice that I noticed with apologists, they always try to relate things to atheism, and this going on with the red pill religion now. I've been dealing with those guys again because they put out some lousy narrative, lousy apologetics, and they included my name in it, and they got a lot of stuff wrong, and I've been correcting them on it. And I've realized that, you know what, they don't care about facts. Alternate facts are just fine with them. And that's why I started explaining to them. That is why I've said that I know more moral anti-theist and atheist than I do moral theist for a generality. Because those theists on that side of the fence, like the red pill religion, the clown car posse, they are not moral people. Straight up not moral people. Now, I'm not generalizing to all theists. I know a lot of moral theists. I love Cy Gart, General Han Solo, great theists, and they are moral people. But if you're going to justify the actions of a church by saying, well, they only spent $1 billion here and $1 billion there to cover it up, but all the other money's going to charity and this and that, you aren't a moral person.
Whenever somebody says, and this has been something that somebody said to me, people who aren't even Catholic that are still defending this for some reason, who said to me, well, then why are you still paying your taxes? It's not an isolated I know you had a conversation on your Facebook about
more than
this.
one.
And I've had a few of them since then as well. And I'm just like, well, there's a difference between taxes and tithing. And if you think they're the same, then we're going to have to go ahead and grant theocracy. And if that's the case, we have a whole different fucking issue to deal with. But we don't have a theocracy, so there's not a correlation between taxes and tithing. So don't compare the two.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm to clarify, I'm not talking about Christian apologist. I'm literally mean apologist, but not like Christian apologist.
Can I ask you something, Steve?
Yeah, but let me touch on this real quick before we go down another rabbit hole, because Sarah brought up a really good point that I want to address. When I was criticizing the church, right, for what they did, right, not for this is a clarification. I am not bashing on the religion. There's nothing about their faith that I attacked. Huge distinction, right? These are the actions that they have done for the crimes and the cover-ups of the crime and when the funds will go to. It has nothing to do with the religious beliefs, and that needs to be emphasized. But when somebody says, well, what about this? The whataboutism and the too cool quay fallacies, which means that, oh, well, Steve, you're condemning me, but you're doing this, blah, blah. That is a fallacy, because what they're doing is trying to distract from what I am making the argument for. And what Cyrus is pointing out, there's people saying, well, why do you live in the U.S.? Me living in the U.S. has absolutely nothing to do with what the Catholic Church did. Now, I could I literally spend wasting my time spending an hour to justify why I live in the United States, right? But that's not the argument. That's what they want to do. They want to deflect from the actual argument by putting it onto somebody else to do this whataboutism. Don't let them do it. And I blocked Chaz. You know, guys know Chaz. He's been around a long time. I finally blocked him because I had enough. I'm like, look, either address the argument or you're done. And he wouldn't let up. He would just continued on, right? And he kept on saying, you know, call me this and call me that, call me a liar, and that I wouldn't address living in the United States. And I said, fuck off. Here's my position. Address the fucking argument as given. Don't try to change it to something else. If later on you want to have the discussion about why I live in the United States, we can do that. But I'm not going to deflect from the original argument that I think if you're giving money to a church, that money is being spent on cover up and paying off people and settlements, then I think that is an immoral act. That's my belief on that. That's my rant. But now you go ahead, Tim. Yeah.
No, what I was going to ask about your experience with apologists on this show and other things. Do you think a lot of them are actually very insecure in their beliefs?
I think they're maybe insecure only because they're not knowledgeable. Like, look at Chris, right? A nice guy. But yeah. I don't think I have 130 people watching. If one of those people that have just one in my audience that's watching or will watch this video thinks that Chris is knowledgeable, I want to talk to that person.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that even a theist would go, yeah, he knew what he was talking about. Not one. No. And I think that leads to insecurity because he knew that my questions were showing him to be wrong. Again, I've been criticized the way I do questioning Fair enough. But you know what? It works. And it is a Socratic type approach. People think they get entrapped. No, if you are questioning somebody where it points out the absurdity of their argument, or they don't understand the concepts, and I'm not saying sharpshoot. I don't like that. I don't sharpshoot like, oh, explain to me all this technical stuff. No, basic stuff that you're arguing. I want to understand if you have an understanding of the concepts, right? Because you're arguing for it. That's all. That's not sharpshooting. That says, okay, tell me what if you're going to argue evolution is wrong, to me, I think you should at least know what evolution means, right? I don't think you have to have a deep understanding of it.
No, that's why the minute that I came in, I asked what I think is the most simple question. Because if you answer what is our closest common ancestor with either chimp or monkey, I'm sorry, the conversation's probably over.
Yeah, and by the way, I knew it was bonobo, but I also watched Dawkins even explain that. But I knew before then too, because
especially when he said Dawkins says it was a chimp. I'm like, Dawkins doesn't say it was a chimp. He specifically said it was bonobo. You're talking out of your ass.
Yeah, that's in that video, and I believe it was he showing what's her name around during that video? Was that the video he started talking? Oh, he has a couple, but yeah, I definitely remember talking about bonobos, but. What was I actually going to say? Oh yeah. To clarify, one sec. I'm trying to read the live chat here. Well, anyways, if you got some questions in live chat, go ahead and I'll try to answer them now. But I do want to get to Tim's ichtheism real quick because I told him I would. Yes. So Tim, by the way, I like you, dude. You're
Thank you.
Cool people. It could be the British accent because I think all British accents are like people are like super intelligent, right? So.
Yes, we can bullshit for.
It sounds amazing. It's gonna be complete bullshit, but I'm like, damn, I have to think about that now. Okay, so the way I understand ichtheism is that the position that not the proposition itself is nonsensical. That'd be a theological non-cognitivist. But an ichtheist just thinks that the word God is meaningless. It doesn't have any reference to anything. It's just like me making up a meaningless word that means nothing. Yeah. And then asking you if you believe in it or not, right? So the problem I have with most ichtheists is that if they don't know what the concept of God is, even after 2,000 years of a conversation of a God, we've kind of sussed out many times what the properties of a type of God would be, enough to have a conversation on it. But if an ichtheist wants to go down that route that they still don't know what a God is, then how can they have...
yeah, I know. That's why I'll carry on and have the conversation. Sure. But
what do you have a conversation about?
If you say to me that you give this deity or this entity all these properties, which to me are inconceivable, I can't comprehend that.
But inconceivability doesn't mean that they can't exist, right? I mean, a lot of things are inconceivable, right? I mean, try looking at cardinalities; they're very hard to conceive. But they exist. I mean, not ontologically, but even the universe you can't conceive, but it exists.
Yeah. But you could explain things in relation to other things, like I can imagine a unicorn or a leprechaun or these elves and fairies and things like this, because I've got sort of objects in my head which put them together. But what is in your head when you think of a God?
Okay, could you imagine a being that exists that was the creator, that everything you see, everything you know, that it created that. It was the thing that came up. It is the ontological necessity or the metaphysical necessity of why we are here. Now, whatever that object is, you don't have to have a good understanding of. Again, I'm not a theist, so, but you don't have to really conceptualize what that being is. That you can think of as more of a placeholder. Whatever it is that designed this universe and is a metaphysical necessity of why the universe exists, let's call that God.
I accept that, Steve. What I'm an atheist about is the Christian God.
And that's fine. The Christian God can be easily created to be a contradiction.
Well, there are some versions, like the Omni God we know is a contradiction, right?
Yeah,
Tim?
the quad Omni God is a contradiction in many different variations.
doesn't even need to be
Well,
quad. Three omni-God is. I mean, even if you have omnibenevolence, omnipotent, and omniscience, evil exists, and all those four premises. Only two or three can be true at the same time. You cannot have all four true at the same time. It's a logically inconsistent system.
yeah, you know, William Lane Craig says God is the greatest conceivable being. You know, the Christian God is the greatest conceivable being.
Well, that's Anselm's version, right?
Yeah.
I mean, again,
which is
But the great conceivable being is by virtue vacuous.
yes,
Like very vacuous definition. It has no substance to it.
well, no, it's. Well, I agree. There's nothing concrete about it, but the concept itself is not incoherent. It is the maximally great being that is even conceivable. Whatever he's just saying that it's infinite. That's basically the way it boiled down. If I think of an infinite number, he can think of something higher, right? So it's just an infinite thing.
And that's fair. And at that point, though, the God you're positing is essentially. There was a guy I was arguing with in the debate chat a while ago who basically said this is G meaning God. It's just the philo God. At that point, you're just positing the philo God. And you know what? If you're positing the philosophy God, just the standard vacuous definition, it is so insubstantive that I don't find any worth to it. Even
I don't either. That's why when people kind of go, "Oh, I subscribe to the God of philosophers or Spinoza's God," I'm like, okay, it doesn't mean you're a theist. It just means that you kind of take all this to be more of I mean, like mathematics, right? I find beauty in mathematics. I find beauty in physics. I see beauty in art, right? And there's an argument from aesthetics and saying, well, that's what God is, right?
The philo God is not divine by definition, and the philo is not virtuous by definition.
There's no autonomy. There's no power.
There's nothing there. The philo God, for all intents and purposes, could be an amalgamation of things by nature that are just simply there as first cause, as omnipresence, as whatever. It can be anything, and that's why I have no want to debate that God. Because one, if somebody subscribes to that God, really, what is their actual position doing in the world? Is it doing anything harmful? No. Okay, why would I even challenge it at that point?
Yeah, and the thing with it, like I said, with atheists generally won't have these discussions because atheists they wouldn't know even how to have a conversation about a God because they don't know what the word means, right? Now you could have a conversation about what the word means, obviously, but I think it's more of a.
I'll accept God as a placeholder.
Yeah, and that's the way I think.
We don't know,
and that's fine. I kind of think of it the same way, right? I mean, I got no problem with that.
It's the Christian. Islamic.
Well, yeah, because I wouldn't even say it's the Christian. It's the one that really gets me is the Calvinist version of God because they've added so many of these weird things to it that just it's like at that point, what the hell are you even talking about?
Predetermined by the nature of God having all of his traits, and now that he's predetermined everything, if you're born, we already know that you either are of the elect or are not of the elect. That means you were born destined to burn. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Have fun.
And all these weird, they use a lot of weird terms too, and it's just like, okay, God is what he is because he's what he is because he is what he is.
Yeah.
Yes. The other thing is, I think immortality is a horrible idea.
Well, it might be a bad idea, but it's not conceptually conceivable. I mean, infinity. Again, that'd go back to infinity, right? Eternity would just be a type of infinity.
I'd say immortality is not a bad idea as long as you have other people who are also immortal, and you have a place to be that is also eternal. If you don't lose the things that you have in reality right now, and you can just perpetuate it and then end it when you want. Like you're immortal up until you cut off your own head, something like that. You know, be a Highlander at this point.
Well, I mean, to be immortal, I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to be immortal in this universe because eventually this universe will be in heat death, right? But there has to be something that I would think that if you are really in a position where you are at maximal state of grace, you should be able to end that existence if you want to.
Yes, and I 100% agree with that. It's like anytime somebody says that, oh, would you like if you had 3 wishes from the genie's lamp, what's one of the things you would wish for? And I would say one of the things I would always say is I would wish for immortality with the caveat that I can end it at my own choosing when the time of my choosing comes.
Right, because if you didn't, you'd be really at shit creek once the universe, trillions of years from now, after all the last red giants burned out, so you'd be screwed.
If you were a prisoner of war, if you were starving and you didn't have like the actual, like your body's biology remained mostly the same, you still could starve. Like, I mean, there's a lot of situations where immortality without the capacity to end things is just a horrible idea. But I could accept immortality with the capacity to end my own life when the time of my choosing comes. Once I've experienced everything that I want to experience in the world, I have no regrets. There's nobody left who's going to miss me or have any issues with me not being here. Then fine. At that point, I'm beholden to nobody but myself, and I've experienced what I want to experience out of life. It's time for it to be over.
But in this world, immortality is clearly impossible. Biologically, you can, except for, again, they call certain things immortal, like jellyfish and things like that. But that's still more of a euphemism than anything else, right? Because they're not truly immortal, but they're a lot more immortal than we are because they have lasted a long time, and those are colonies more than anything else.
Yes.
My thing about my mortality. My mortality is what gives me motivation.
Having a time limit is a great motivator behind anything.
Yes.
Yeah, well, if you think that you're going to have this like long afterlife, it's like a lot of people. I've actually people tell me, well, let's put why bother reading anything? Why bother learning anything? Why bother doing anything? Because I'm only caring about what happens after I die. So all I do is go to church, kind of stuff. I don't think they live their lives at that point. I think they've missed out on living their lives, and they've literally added nothing to society at that point. Now, I'm not saying that I have, but I try to do what I can for my limited little world.
Well, your contribution to society is having a channel where people can. That's fine. That's funny.
Dude, it's the minor things. Just yesterday, a guy on my Facebook page. I'm not going to dox him, but a guy on my Facebook page said the only reason he's changed his positions and that he is now going to be starting an educational fund for things and getting into philosophy. One, because he's getting into philosophy because he's listened to me, but is because he mentioned Dr. Richard Carrier, he mentioned Aaron Ra, he mentioned Paula Gia, and me. He said, because of you four, I have completely changed the way I've thought about things. That if you just do that with one person, you've influenced somebody.
That's how I feel too. There was actually a guy who I met through gaming very recently. He actually did. It's the same situation. I'm not going to dox the guy. He's becoming one of my good friends. But the banner that's on my channel now and on my Twitter and like the new avatar with the background and stuff that I use now, he built all those for me because he had when we first met, he had a perception of what an atheist was. Because apparently his uncle was a very virulent one, a very caustic one. And then when I said I was an atheist, we had a conversation literally after gaming together. So not even somebody who's normally part of this conversation for a good 3 hours on theology and epistemology. And I think your
mic is farting.
Is the mic farting?
Yeah. Mike farts. It's better now, but that was weird. Now we can't hear you at all. Oh, he farted himself out of existence.
I'm dying.
There you go.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, much better. But at the end of the conversation, he said that apparently I had changed his opinion on what an atheist actually was, and then he started building stuff for my channel. He's a graphics designer by trade. And I was just like, wait, most atheists you talk to aren't like me? Because like most atheists that I talk to kind of are, like Godless Cranium, Apologia, like most of them are chill.
Very similar. Yeah, very, very similar. Yeah. Well, and it's kind of funny you mentioned that because I had asked those guys from Red Pill Religion today. I said, who would you rather leave your child with? These anti-theists that you're always complaining about, mostly the ones that they know from the internet, or one of the persons from the diocese from the Pennsylvania church. Yeah. They didn't answer. They basically said, well, and I have to get back to them, but they basically said something along the lines of, well, there's bad people everywhere. I'm like, you've completely dodged the question.
You just deflected. Instead of answering, it's like it's the reason why I try to tell people not to like deflect every theist into young Earth creationism, because that's something that we see happen a few times. Somebody's like, no, you have to take your Bible as literally. You have to take it in English, and all that does is just make it easier to knock it down. You can't. do stuff like that. You can't ignore a question completely by deflecting it or falling into whataboutism or anything like that. You can't.
And that's what they've been doing. A lot of
do
whataboutism.
that.
And I'm not the only one that's noted it. So
It's you when somebody says something specifically, you can't just say, well, what about this? You have to go, okay, that thing might be bad, but we're not talking about that thing right now. We're talking about this thing. I know, Steve, are you familiar with Imam Tawhidi? The Imam Tawhidi, he's the Imam of Peace.
I don't know
on social media. He's a Muslim apologist and imam who's trying to reform Islam to be a lot more, basically the mirror image of what Christianity is in the United States. Like very chill Christianity is what he wants to muddle Islam to be, and I support him in those efforts. One of the things that he's pointed out when somebody says, why are you focusing so much on de-radicalizing Islam? Aren't there other things you could be doing that would probably be easier? And he just kind of looked at the guy who was interviewing him and said, you don't walk into a cancer ward and say, what about AIDS?
Yep. Yeah, that's a very good analogy. Exactly. God, I'm going to have to use that. I'm stealing that. That's true. That's very, very true, right? Wow, that's actually pretty good. I got to wrap this up soon. So if you guys got questions, let's kind of get those out of your way. Sirius, you had asked me the other day, though, what you should use for videos on mistakes that atheists make. I want to touch on
Clifford's principle is what you mentioned the last time we talked.
What did I say?
You said Clifford's principle was the first
Clifford's
thing
principle is really I would really definitely touch on Clifford's principle on evidentialism, but more than that, I don't think you saw it, but I was on a thread where I started off very simple in my line of reasoning, but as people were kind of going, well, Steve, you're wrong, and giving me just the dumbest arguments because I asked for citation after citation on the entire thread. You know how many citations I got from an atheist? 0. I gave a logical argument. I gave a citation from a reputable source, and I even gave a peer-reviewed paper from a professor from NYU. Right? I gave the paper. Wasn't good enough. Right? And it's just, it's a bunch of word games. You need to tell atheists that when somebody's making a logical argument and they're using logic and reason, if it goes against their ideology, they may need to rethink their ideology.
Yeah, I think that can go for pretty much everybody. Like just in general, if you are ignoring some type of fact, whatever the fact is, because of your predisposition of any kind, the predisposition is probably the problem.
Yeah, but I see if atheists do that quite frequently. Like, a real basic version of that argument would be, and this is the exact one I was using, but this was a different kind of thing. But this was on Twitter. But I said, okay, basic argument. Philosophical atheism is the belief that gods don't exist. Okay, right. And again, you can get in more specificities that it's the proposition of theism is false, or ontologically that gods don't exist, or the psychological state. You can get all the technicalities, but simplistically, philosophical atheism is the belief that gods don't exist. Would you agree with premise 1?
Yes.
Okay. Premise 2, I don't hold a belief that gods don't exist. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. You don't hold the belief that gods do not exist.
Right. I do not believe. I do not believe in gods. Right.
Because we're not assigning probabilities. So right now we're just dealing with
no, exactly. Not a probabilistic. So I do not believe in gods. But that's different. I do not believe is not the same thing as I believe not true. Two different things. The negation is completely different. So premise 2 is I do not have the belief that no gods exist. You know me, so you have to take my word for that. But you agree that's true. Okay. Conclusion: I am not an atheist by philosophical standards.
No, if you're going from all the philosophy that I've read, no. Okay,
and actually, I even broke it down even further. My first premise was atheism is a philosophical term.
Is a yes, the same way that scientific theory is also a hard term.
Evolution is a biological term, right? So atheism falls under philosophical. So atheism is a philosophical term. Atheism in philosophy is a belief that gods don't exist. I don't hold a belief that gods don't exist, therefore I'm not an atheist. That is logically sound, period. They would not accept that. And when I asked them what premise do you not agree with, I could not get an answer. If you're going to say an argument is wrong, you need to show why the premise is wrong. And I even had one person not too long ago tell me, you haven't proved your premises. Serious, what's wrong with that picture?
You can't one, you can't prove them. Two, it's not up to you to prove them. It's whether or not the other person agrees with them or disproves them.
That's exactly it. If you don't prove, you don't prove
the
premises.
premise.
These are not scientific assertions which you don't prove anyways. You're offering an argument that somebody can accept or reject contingent upon it. If they accept the premises, they think it's logical, they get the sound, and they find it convincing. But you don't prove a premise, because all premises are assumptions. You're making an assumption that could be true, but it could not be true. A premise doesn't have to be true, but then your argument is unsound. But it's up to you to determine whether you accept the premises or not. I'm offering them to you to accept, like I just did to you. I gave you 4 premises. You accepted all of them. You agree that therefore that is a logical argument.
Which is why the fact that if you ask me the exact same questions, if we're not assigning probabilities, I have to answer in the same way, which is why I have the position that I do, which is philosophical agnostic, colloquial atheist, which covers both things and ends the freaking conversation.
Yeah, because I was kidding to Godless Iowan, because Godless Iowan was having he said something on Twitter where he said he was talking to a coworker, and the coworker said, "So you're a pastor?" And he's like, "Well, I was a pastor." He's like, she's like, "What are you now?" She's like, "I'm an atheist." She's like, "Well, how do you be a pastor and be an atheist?" He's like, "No,
being a human being,
I'm not a pastor any longer. I am now an atheist." I guess the coworker couldn't understand this, and I said, "Dude, I feel your pain, because I say I'm not an atheist, but I'm also not a theist." And people go, "Well, I don't understand your argument." Okay, well, I just gave the argument like I did Cirrus. Well, that's just word games. No, it is not. Stop throwing those things around like it's word games or word salad. If you don't understand something, it doesn't mean it's word salad or word games.
No, if you can take the words that they're saying, if you don't understand them, look them up, and after you've looked up the definitions, if they still don't make sense, then you have Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. By the way, I got Lucifer Almighty in my live chat. He's one of my mods. He's had this problem before. He's actually been blocked by Atheist for using a very probably similar argument to that I have. Because it's a valid argument. You can't, if you're going to say the argument is a value, at least tell me what premise is wrong.
No, and when that's the case, you also have to ask, okay, what are you arguing for? Because if I say, for instance, this is along the same tangent, if I say, well, I kind of have a theory about this, and somebody just barged in and was like, that's not what theory means, it means this in science. And I'm like, well, I'm not using the scientific definition, I'm using the colloquial definition. They have to accept that.
Well, I find it to be a special pleading when you enforce that you have to use scientific definitions outside of like a scientific classroom, because they say, well, this is not a philosophical classroom. I'm like, okay, when we talk about science, we're not in a philosophical. I mean, we're not a scientific classroom, but we still hold people to proper terminology.
Yes.
Why is it any different in philosophy?
And it's the same thing, especially when somebody says that you don't need philosophy for anything, and I'm just like, well, what is the scientific method? It's a methodology. Where does methodology come from? It comes from philosophy. Oh no, here we are.
Yeah, the whole point. Methodological naturalism is philosophy. It's a philosophy of science. Okay, so we got some questions here. Does that make sense, by the way, Tim? What I said, that you don't have to be an atheist or a theist?
Yes, yes, yeah,
okay.
It does. I think one of the things you've got to do as well, if I don't understand what you're saying, I've got to say, but I don't know. I've got, what do you mean by that? Let me think about it, and I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's
great. Allows people to expound. That's good. That's good.
And Butt makes a point too. He says the worst part about lacktheist, and by the way, lacktheist, there's two ways to look at lacktheist. Lacktheist is a person who just thinks that atheism is a lack of belief in God. Now, sometimes it could be used as a pejorative of somebody like who actually has a belief that gods don't exist, but then retreats into lacktheism or lack of belief when they're asked for an evidential burden or epistemic burden. But says the worst part about lacktheists is when they think they're smart for knowing gnosis and knowledge, and anybody who doesn't, and everybody else doesn't know this, or anybody doesn't know this. But here's the thing, and he's right. But here's the thing: agnostic does not mean knowledge. Thomas Henry Huxley came up with the term agnosticism because he was in a party and he was dealing with a bunch of people that thought they had a special connection with knowledge from God. They were basically modern Gnostics. And so he wanted to not be part of that group. So he came up with the term agnostic. That's the way he coined the term. And it was actually more of a methodological approach to these conversations. But things have changed since then. But it doesn't mean without knowledge. Okay. Agnosticism is a belief position. Now, it's not a belief position on the proposition, because that would be theism or atheism. The proposition is true, it's theism. Proposition is false, is atheism. but I would maybe call it a second order thing. I would have to actually ask, Malpass or Ozzy on that, but I can see why it'd be a second order belief, maybe. But it's still a belief. It is a belief that I cannot properly assign a truth value to that proposition. Does that make sense, Chris and Tim?
Yeah.
Okay. So what other questions you got? Somebody want to know about Piltdown Man. Piltdown Man is one of those things where it's kind of funny because the story has been so changed to where it makes it actually sound like scientists were perpetuating this.
Oh, I've already covered Piltdown Man. If you want me to go at it.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, take this one.
Yeah, go ahead, do it.
So Piltdown Man pretty much was indeed a hoax, but not by the scientific community. It was done by. The current theory is that it was done by the man who found it, because he would know how how everything was put together. He would know how to make it look like it's old and how everything were to be done, because he worked in the relative field. So if you go off of this, which is the most likely hypothesis, then when you go by this, it would make sense that the entire scientific community was indeed fooled by it, until they figured out that they were not finding any other creature that looked just like this within the fossil records of the area.
It's sad for like 40 years because they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, and so they just kept it in museums a lot of time in the storage and sometimes out, but they just sat with it for, like you said, 40 years until they finally realized they weren't finding anything like Piltdown Man. Piltdown Man was just something that and then once they actually took a look at him, they discovered that a lot of everything that he was pieced together by was with different parts of different creatures. And it was something that was a brilliant hoax. Don't get me wrong, it was completely brilliant. And this man had actually come to find out had been the perpetrator of a lot of different hoaxes. And it was his, if you want to boil it down, it might have been his, and these are just, of course, speculations because we won't know now. But if you want to speculate, it was most likely his way of trying to have England at the forerunner of scientific knowledge, because all these fossils were being found everywhere else but England. And so not only that, but he also was trying to get in part of the science community within there and be recognized by them. And this was a really, really big fault on his behalf, because now his name and reputation will be tarnished for the rest of.
Yeah, and again, it was science that actually determined this. And by the way, there was, to my knowledge, no scientist said, "Hey, this is what we would expect for evolution." In fact, that's the reason why it sat for 40 years. They didn't know where to put it.
Yeah, they sat. Yeah. They.
And I don't mean physically. I mean in the line of phylogeny. They didn't know where it went. They were like, "What the hell is this?"
So they chalked it up as an anomaly up until the point where they could determine what it was. When they determined it was a hoax, it throws away. It gets thrown out. That's what happens, stuff like that.
Yeah, so this narrative that it was a scientific hoax is it's true and it's false. It was a hoax on science, but it wasn't a scientific hoax committed by scientists.
No, it was done by one man who wasn't even he was, I believe, an amateur archaeologist or paleontologist or whatever. He had a very extensive knowledge in it, but he wasn't someone who was at the forefront of it.
Correct. So Cyrus, to go back to this real quick,
sure.
Can you explain real quick with why science would be useless without philosophy? Because we have people that are saying philosophy is useless.
So okay, first of all, philosophy boiled down is just how you think, like how you think what you think, or why you think what you think. There is a distinction a little bit where philosophy can help you figure out the why and science can help you figure out the how, but science can't do that without philosophy because methodology falls directly under philosophy. You establish and create methodologies through the use of philosophy, whether you're cognizant of it or not. If you're if you're thinking about how to think, you're thinking about the actual process that constitutes the algorithm that your brain is using to get to any conclusion, whether you think it or not, you are utilizing philosophy.
Yep.
Informally or formally.
And even the concepts of knowledge and truth, those fall under philosophy. If we ask, how do we know what something is true? How can we say something is true? How do we, in science, say something is a fact? How do we say it's that we know something to be the case in science? Science doesn't tell you any of those things.
And that's the thing, is that
Philosophy does.
When somebody says that, oh, you don't need philosophy for this, typically, and would you agree with me, Steve, typically they're talking about formal philosophy. You don't need formal philosophy for this. And that's true.
Yeah.
You don't need
a lot of philosophy people will never ever use.
Yeah, you don't need formal philosophy for things, but how you reach conclusions, how you think, how you use your brain, not talking about how the synapses fire, because that's psychology, is philosophy. That's what that is, boiled down to its most basic form. And if you didn't have that to begin with, how would you construct a methodology? And if you can't construct a methodology, you can't construct the scientific method. And without the scientific method, how can you have science?
Yeah, I think the problem is this kind of reminds me of the same mindset that creationists have against biology and evolution, right? They want to disparage it, but they don't take the time to go actually and learn it. Everybody I've ever talked to that says philosophy is useless has never taken the time to learn it. And you know what? I speak from experience because I was one of those people. I said 4 years ago very clearly many times, not on air because I wasn't really on air at the time, but I had no use for philosophy. I had a guy that was a friend of mine, PhD in philosophy, he used to kick my ass. And I'm like, this is just a bunch of semantic mumbo jumbo. But I was wrong. I mean, I realized as we were having conversations, okay, it's kind of interesting. Plus, when the Pal Talk Power Rangers came on and the Precept and all that kind of stuff, I was like, maybe I should kind of learn more about this. I started before then, but I said to myself, what is it about philosophy that my friend is using against me to destroy my positions here, right? And I realized that it's because he knew it's philosophy. That's how you do it in philosophy.
It's the reason that people can get the floor wiped with them when they're dealing with someone like William Lane Craig, because Craig is going to use philosophy as a weapon. And if you don't know how to use philosophy as a shield, then I'm sorry, like any situation where somebody has a weapon and you don't have a way to defend yourself, you're going to get skewered.
Yeah. And even still, even in these conversations, things like that get brought up. I mean, like Chris, even in this conversation, he had talked to Tim about proper basic beliefs. Tim, have you ever heard that term before?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now, a lot of people wouldn't, though, right? Unless you've looked at philosophy or you've been around the Great Debate community or some of these videos, you probably wouldn't be familiar with the properly basic beliefs. So you kind of have to have an understanding of the terminology if you're going to have the theist-atheist kind of discussions, because these are philosophical positions.
Yeah.
And so it's very heavy into philosophy. Well, how do we know reality exists? Well, okay, well, I know it exists because I just take it as an assumption.
Yes.
I just prove fact.
Yes, I agree with Aaron Ra about it. It's that it's irrelevant if we're in the Matrix or a simulation or whatever. It
is irrelevant, and worse than that, irrelevant. Yeah, and worse than that, if you go look at you can look at Hilary Putnam's, you can look at his arguments, and you also look at Wittgenstein's arguments against us being in dreams, and both of them kind of have similar arguments that it is actually self-refuting that to say like we were living in a dream. And the Brandon Nevat, he has linguistic, his is a linguistic argument using constraints, but he argues that there's that it's impossible for us to be living in a vat right now, because the difference between the words that we know now, what it would mean to an actual brain in a different universe, having these words, they don't correspond to the same objects. It's a really nuanced argument, and I don't do it justice, but it's something along those lines. But even still, who gives a fuck? This is our reality.
Well, that's why when somebody
whatever this is our reality, people.
When somebody tries to attack you with solipsism, first of all, anytime that somebody's used solipsism in a conversation that I've seen, I'm not saying this is always the case, but almost every time it seems to be the last line of defense when you're backed into a corner. That's what I see a lot. I'm not saying it's always the case, but that seems to be what happens. Basically, the whole, well, how do you know what you know? Well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? Well, how do you even know you're not a brain into that? Like, okay, we backed into the part we've backed out so far that if you say you're a brain in the vat, there's nothing else, then you destroy your own arguments too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. By the way, I forgot, but made a good point. He pointed out G.E. Moore's here's a hand or here's one hand argument, and his argument is basically it sounds stupid because it's just a common sense argument, but he's basically saying, here's one hand, here's another hand. I have two hands, therefore, well, wait, I have here's one hand, here's another hand. There's at least two external objects that we know exist in this world, therefore this world does exist. That's basically G. Moore's. Is that right? But
that's perfect. That's hilarious.
I mean that's yeah. He notes Wittgenstein's transcendental argument is cooler, but it's not well known. Yeah, I have a hard time understanding Wittgenstein because it's obviously doing a lot with linguistics, like his beetle in a box argument, right? Took me God knows how long to even break down the personal language argument. It's just something that I just have an ability to wrap my head around. But I'm not good at these really, really technical stuff in philosophy. It's not my thing because I'm not a philosopher, right? I try to learn very superficial things, so I at least have an understanding of these conversations. I leave it to people that actually have a good understanding of these things. I know Coffee Smug does. I know Butt does. And I kind of defer to them. I mean, so if they say, hey, Steve, I think you hosed that up, I'm going to actually look at them and go, oh, you know what? Maybe I did, right? I'm going to second guess myself because I know they actually do read a lot more about this than I do, but I'm not exactly ignorant of it. Coffee Suck says, Steve, the philosophist sounds like an instrumental ought or hypothetical norm. The philosophist, is that guy from YouTube? I think he changed. If it is, he changed his name. I don't know what he's referring to. Then the argument is whether he begged the question. Yeah, and that's what I kind of thought too. Look, if I say, well, here's one hand, here's the other, external world exists, how is that not really kind of begging the question? Because you still don't know whether that external world is an actual reality. But it is to us, and that's the way I look at it, right? It's our reality. Yeah. Oh, Steve the philosophist. Okay, that guy. I'm sorry. I didn't realize there was Steve the philosophist in the live chat.
Just a more cool Steve.
Yeah, exactly.
No, my stepdad's name is Steve. So anytime that I'm having this conversations about what goes on in our community with my family, half the time he's like, I wasn't in the Google Hangout with you, and I'm like, God, I swear I'm going to throw things at you.
Bored Hominid. What an interesting name. He says, atheist equals belief that no God exists is the same as zero, a natural number. Both are wrong, quote, wrong, because that's not the convention. Well, that's not true because in some convention, it may not be conventional, but zero can be a natural number in some frameworks, right? If you want to do indexing of a summation, you can, if you define it, if you state you're putting zero in the natural set, you're allowed to do that. So it's not wrong to do that.
Isn't zero a natural set in binary?
Is zero in the natural set in binary?
Well, binary only has.
Well, the natural set is all the natural numbers: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9, right? All the positive integers.
And for binary, binary refers to numbers that are in the natural set. You wouldn't actually have natural sets in binary because binary is not a set of numbers. Binary is a language.
Yeah,
binary is
represented by two symbols.
Right,
yeah.
And like 0, 1 is 1, 1, 0 is 2, and so on and so forth.
1, 1 is 3, 1, 0, 1.
But those all represent a number on the real number lines.
They represent. That's why binary is just language. Binary is language represented by numbers.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's same as hexadecimal, isn't it? It's just
that's base 16.
It's just a convention, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just like you can use hexadecimal to represent color. I can say hashtag FFFFFF, and you can know that he's meaning pure white.
Yeah.
Somebody says binary is not a language. I mean, binary is code. I mean, if you want to, I wouldn't maybe call it a language either. I mean, it is a binary code, but I don't think that I would necessarily call it a language because language is something you actually write in, and yes, you can write in binary.
But I can write in binary. But
when you write a language, like for example, in BASIC, you have words that represent things like do this, go there, do that. Right? Those are languages. I mean, I've heard it referred to as binary language. I just don't know if I'm a fan of that.
I would say that I view it more as a language than I do as numbers. I don't view it as numbers. I view it in the same way I view language, which is that there are numbers and symbols that are correlative to ideas. The same way language is. I say cat. Cat has no meaning unless you actually know what cat I'm referring to. I'm referring to an animal. Binary is representing an actual.
You know what? I'm gonna have to research that a little bit. That's actually that's the first interesting question I've had in ages. Is binary a language? Shoot, where's a computer scientist when you need one? You know, I'm gonna be agnostic on that for right now until I can actually do some research, because I do think it's a code or even a syntax. I don't know about language yet, although I've heard it referred to that way. What's that?
Any number system is a convention, isn't it? You know, it's we use a 1 to 10 is a.
But that's not a language, right?
No.
So why, if base 10 is not a language, why is base 2 a language?
It's just a mathematical convention, isn't it? Like I being the square root of -1.
Or J.
Yeah.
Fair, and I guess that's the same way as having, if you had numbers representative of letters via something like a cipher, it would not then make the numbers a language.
Or you could subscribe to the true empiricism version of a 4-digit binary. wrap your head around that one.
Jason just pointed out that I'm thinking of machine language, which is true. That's not incorrect.
Machine language, yeah, machine language is machine language, sure, but machine language is taken down to even a lower level of a binary in some system, you know, at some point in the system. So, Steve the Philosophist, binary is a language like taco is a sandwich.
Taco is sandwich. To me, taco is sandwich. Hot dog is sandwich. It all sandwich. I eat sandwich.
Yeah, Iron Charioteers. Is DNA binary? No, DNA has four generally. I mean, I almost said amino acids because Nephilim Free thinks that DNA is comprised of amino acids. That's 4 nucleotides. Yeah, no, he'll never get past that. Everybody said he's moved on and that he doesn't think that anymore, and I think he still does.
I think that's very hard to wrap your head around. DNA is very hard, unless you've got an education to wrap your head around.
I guess. I mean, it's a macromolecule. I mean, the hard part for me was understanding there's more than just 4 nucleotides in there. There can be other nucleotides in there, especially when you add methylation. So you can have these 5-HMC and there's a couple other weird things out there that these can have, but generally speaking, there's 4 nucleotides, but there can be other ones. But I did a couple presentations on DNA. I went from the DNA all the way to protein synthesis, so I thought that was enjoyable to do that. I think that people, if they like those kind of things, learn about it, then kind of do a presentation on it. You know, see if you get a handle on it. That's how I learned it. Well, I had to go to college too, but I didn't understand it in college. I didn't. No, I'm serious. I was rote memorization. Like when we had to learn the Krebs cycle, rote memorization. Didn't have I couldn't have told you what the hell pyruvite was if my life depended on it, but I knew how to figure it out in the Krebs cycle, right? Didn't know what it was. It was this literally rote memorization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the mistake with DNA was comparing it to a computer language.
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. DNA is not a freaking language. DNA is not even a code.
And then the creationists jumped on it like it was white on rice.
Yeah, and I've had that discussion. I've asked a lot of biologists, and to date, I haven't found one that tells me it's a code.
Yeah, that's what Nephilim thinks it is. He thinks it's a code. He thinks it's
Nephilim 3 thinks DNA is comprised of amino acids. So what does that tell you?
It's a code, and therefore a code implies a language.
You know what's funny? Frustrated. This is what I don't get. If they wanted to move that argument to the RNA synthesis from the codon chart is a code, they would have a case.
Yeah, but they don't. They just stick
Why
with,
not?
Oh, no. DNA is a code.
That is a code. I mean, if you want to get down to it, I'm fine with saying the RNA synthesis codon chart is a code. Okay, great. What is that? What's okay? Big fucking deal.
Yeah, but it's still funny that they don't ever go after that. They stick with DNA is a code.
Especially when they tell you, oh, you just wanted to admit it's a code because then a code has the coder and then you're denying God. I'm like, well, if that was the case, why am I admitting that the RNA synthesis could be considered a code? I'm fine with that.
Right.
I just shat all of your argument. That's obviously not why I don't think DNA is not a code. I think DNA is not a code because it's not a code.
The biggest issue is the fact that they see things that happen, that like they see depictions of what's happening within the body, and because it looks like something that is like, for instance, there's one section of the body that when you look at it, it looks like it walks, and so they automatically assume that that means that that piece is walking, and that means that it is a mechanism, it's a machine, and that in that case we need someone to create this. And it's like, you do realize that that's just your brain making patterns like it should be doing,
Well,
right?
if you actually, I've actually looked into the molecular transport of some of these things, and you know what, the graphics that they have, that's not the way it really actually works for active transport and stuff like that, or whatever it is called. When you've got the with the kinesis little things that walk along the fibers and stuff like that, they make it out to be a lot more mechanistic than it actually is. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, they make it seem like it's just a machine.
Yeah.
Well, and the best part about that is we understand very easily. Like it's very easy to discern that humans are pattern recognizing individuals. Nothing more. It's a very good survival trait to be a pattern recognizing individual. I see footprints in the dirt. Those footprints are not dry; they are wet. This every single other time I've seen this means that there have been food, animals, and water. The wetness. Okay, the pattern recognition that I have tells me that these things are near, aiding in my survival.
And by the way, I guess I should have called. Let me correct. I should have called it active transport. I was thought about it. Active transport actually with actually transporting macromolecules or stuff or ions across the membrane. So no, that's not the same thing as moving those little molecules around the actin fiber or whatever it is. I want to correct myself because I'm sure a biologist is going to go, Steve, that's not right. That drives me nuts when I say things I know aren't right.
But to further on the scenario that Serge just pointed out, then you come across a particular footprint that is a lot larger and a lot deeper set in mud than the other creatures around it, and you know that this is a fairly big, fairly heavy creature.
Well, you see, frustrated atheists, that is just evidence that humans and dinosaurs exist at the same time, and the banana is the enemy of the atheists.
Of course, we all know this. But like I was saying, that you see a bigger creature than what you personally can take down.
That also aids in your survival.
Stay away. Yeah, but to stay away from that creature unless you have more people.
Has anybody? I watched today a YouTube video. I don't know. You've probably seen it, but it's the Incompetence Opera.
I have not seen it.
Look it up. It was done for. It talks about the Peter effect and the Dunning-Kruger. It's only 16 minutes. Just look at if you put Dunning-Kruger search in YouTube, you'll come up with the Incompetence Opera.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's very entertaining, and I think it sums up a lot of.
I definitely think the Dunning-Kruger is a real thing, and I definitely think that the entire clown car posse, they literally on that peak they call it Mount Stupid, or the very peak of the first peak where it's got because you're plotting between your experience and your knowledge, right? So the more you know, the more people think they're more confident, right? And then you reach a point where you go, God damn, I don't really know jack shit. Right, so your confidence goes way down, and then you start building up on this plateau, this rise again as you actually learn things properly and you have a better understanding of it. They haven't reached that point. They're on that peak of fucking stupid that they have limited knowledge but a hell of a lot of confidence.
I'm curious, Steve. So to you, is philosophy another religion with priests, popes, and everything else?
Clearly, yeah.
Oh, you're right. I also remember that I forgot to tithe to the I 100% forgot to tithe to the Church of Evolutionism.
You could send it to my Patreon. I accept the tithing. It's tax free. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make sure to do that at some point Give me a minute.
Yay!
Yeah, we all do have our evolutionism cards, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The NASA sent it to me.
Remember, you can choose whether or not you want to believe in evolution, but participation is mandatory.
It is.
Yeah, and you know, like Chris today, that's a perfect example of Dunning-Kruger, right? I mean, clearly he didn't have the background on any of these topics, and that's a problem when you're going to have these types of discussions. Because he's going to get stomped, just stomped.
Yeah.
The fact that he passed biology confuses me.
I'm not sure that he did. He said he did. It's again. I mean,
Hey, Steve.
Kindergarten.
Several biologists have said to him that
I don't think that man has ever talked to a
millions.
professional biologist in his life.
I think that I'm a fan of Cygart, and I'm a fan of Cygart for the specific reason that it was only through listening to somebody who understood biology, who was also not just a theist, but a Christian, who helped me realize where I was wrong when I was a younger creationist. For that, I am incredibly thankful that Cygart is not just a theist, but a Christian, because it means that anytime somebody tells me that, oh, evolution's not true, I'll literally just point them to side.
Yeah, no, and it takes a village, right? I mean, matter of fact, it's good that there are theists out there that accept evolution, that we can point to them and say, look, if this narrative is that evolution is something that you only find in atheism, you're completely wrong. Because that narrative is just bullshit among bullshit.
Yep.
And again, I think it was Tim that pointed out these are all scripts. These are all just same things over again. Look at evolution. It's just an atheist plot to take over the world.
remember, evolution leads to school shootings.
I mean, one of the things that I find amazing is that we weren't having, when I was growing up, we were not having these conversations.
Well, that's what the dialogue has turned to. I notice when people start in the great debate community or on YouTube or when they break into the scene, almost always they start off with the most basic of arguments, right? And that's because they haven't got the knowledge. Like if somebody came in with a had advanced degrees in knowledge, they'll come in with a different level, right? They'll be like, boom, and you're like, oh crap, here's a new guy on the scene that knows his shit, right? But the other people, they have to work their way up to that, and a lot of them take the easy route by throwing out the really simple arguments. I never did, actually. If you go back and watch my earlier videos, I jumped in both barrels. One of my first videos was me going right after Ken Hovind, having a discussion with him, because I was like, you're just wrong, dude.
I'm the opposite.
I mean,
look at the early videos on my channel. I'm an idiot.
we don't have young Earth creationists in the UK. Well, we didn't when I was growing up.
You can have all ours.
I was about to say, would you like some of ours?
Yeah, we'll send them to you.
We'll send you Hogan and we'll send you Ham.
It's not even bad arguments. I notice even the more basal people that entry level argumentation, they love to do the canards that get some notice. Oh well, one theists, they just believe one of those sky daddy thingies. I can't stand that kind of crap. I really can't. And there's people in our community that do it, and I will call them out for it, even though they still do it, and that's fine. That's their shtick. But I don't think that helps the conversation.
Well, one of the reasons I'm glad that Godless. I'm sorry, frustrated.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I'm glad that Godless Cranium did a video where he had nothing but theists on his channel talking about the things that atheists do that tune out the conversation.
That's one of them. Things like that. We're calling it a mental illness. That's another thing. I actually, what's funny is I actually called somebody out on that on Twitter the other day, and they said I was right. They're like, you know what? Good point. That you don't find that very often.
You don't.
So that was nice. Because my argument was basically, look, to say something is a mental illness is that you're saying the brain is not working properly. You're saying there's a misfunction of the brain. The brain is doing something that it's not supposed to do. That's not what a belief in God is, because that just means if God doesn't exist, you have a false belief. But false beliefs are not something that is what makes a brain faulty, because we all have false beliefs. The goal is not to have the false beliefs. The goal is to have good beliefs, but the reality is we all have false beliefs. We just may not be aware of it.
Until someone points it out.
What's that?
Until someone points it out to you.
Yeah. Well, and then ESO says, what if somebody is mentally ill and using religion as a crutch? But that's not the same thing.
Yeah,
that's not a totally different thing.
It's like saying I'm mentally ill and I'm a human, therefore all humans are mentally ill. No, it's not the same
No.
argument as saying that this person is mentally ill
Because they have a belief, yeah.
therefore theism makes you mentally ill. No, if the argument doesn't work for other things, why is it suddenly now working over here? Isn't that technically considered special pleading?
Well, I don't know if it's so much that like theism makes you crazy. I think the argument is more having a belief in God is irrational, and I don't believe that. I think
which is also not true.
Completely not true.
You can come to a theistic belief very rationally, just like you can come to an atheistic belief very rationally.
Exactly.
What about a young Earth creationist?
They're all idiots.
They're all morons.
Yeah, all of those are morons.
Well, and the reason I say that they're irrational, Tim, is because we have actual evidence that is demonstrably showing they are wrong. They are actually denying reality. I consider that to be irrational.
Well, it's like
It's delusional.
Well,
Yes.
for instance, it would be a type of delusion, yes. But like, I can't prove to you that a God does not exist, and you can't prove to me that a God does exist. We can both come to rational conclusions on opposite ends. But when somebody says the Earth is 6,000 years old, and I give them literally every bit of evidence that shows that they're wrong, where it's not just rationalizations that get us to one side of the fence or the other, it's physical, tangible things. The conversation's a bit different, and at that point, yeah, you have idiots.
Yeah,
But, sir, were you there?
I don't know.
We're still looking for people to have conversations with Saitan Brunicate. Rationality Rules was trying to get him. We're going to definitely get Rationality Rules and Saitan to have a discussion. That's going to break the internet. I think RJ Downing, we were trying to arrange for him. But the problem is, it's as good and as bad. We're booked until like almost the end of October, which is good, but at the same time, it's bad because we have a lot of conversations we want to have.
You keep pushing off my debate, Steve.
Yeah, like
I'm real upset.
We actually had to push back his debate because the only date of availability for Godless Cranium was the date that they had their debate. And if you're only, we kind of have an unstated rule. If you only have one day available in that month, we're going to give you a higher priority, even if something needs to get moved, if it could possibly be moved. And that's for everybody. I think that just makes sense, right?
I think I'm less frustrated than Catholic Fusionist is at this point.
He'll live.
He will.
Sir, you debating?
A Catholic Fusionist. It's gonna be 2-on-2. I don't know who his female partner is until I know. I'm not going to reveal who my female partner is yet.
AKA Max Hangs Out is a Catholic Fusionist. Catholic Fusionist used to be known as Max Hangs Out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a debate on should abortion be legal or illegal.
Yeah, matter of fact, poor Max, he was actually using that whole Steve. What about United States? You living there? And I like Max a lot. We go way back. We don't agree on a lot of things, but we have a good understanding with each other. And I said, dude, this isn't like you to use a fallacy. This is too Quay. Come on, don't even try to say that it's not whataboutism and stuff like that. Don't even
try.
Don't even try it. I told you I took speech therapy for years, but I think he backed off of that because I haven't heard from him since after I pointed that out to him. So that's good. So maybe he did recognize it. Hopefully, because I mean, would you agree that it's completely about whataboutism if I say, why are you condemning the church because you live in the United States and they commit war crimes? How could that not be whataboutism? You're literally saying, well, what about?
Oh, that's definitely whataboutism.
Yeah.
Not to mention, even if it weren't whataboutism, like let's assume that it was valid. Again, taxes and tithing are not comparable.
Yeah, they're not even fair analogies on multiple different levels, right? Because I got to live somewhere, and
I can grant that
United States.
That it's whataboutism and it's still not that. I can grant that it's not whataboutism and it's still.
Now let me ask you this though. I actually left the Mormon Church for moral reasons because I didn't like the way they were involving themselves in the political system in California with Prop 8 and the way they held for conversion therapy for treating gays. This was before I just stopped believing, but I was like, I can't be a part of this. I just don't. I find it to be morally wrong. Why is the church doing this? So that is a much more equal situation to what is going on in the Catholic Church. Would you not agree? I took a moral high ground. So I'm not being hypocritical.
No, you're not. You're not being hypocritical there because you are. It's something that you personally have done. Just like when somebody tries to tell me that I don't understand the young Earth creationist argument, bullshit. 16 of my years were young Earth creationist years, so don't even. I was
Yeah,
in those shoes.
you have the Abeka stuff.
Yes, and I know that I'm not just remembering things incorrectly, and now you know that I wasn't talking out of my butt because we got other people who also grew up on Abeka literature in the same hangout, and literally we're just sitting there going, "Remember this part? Yeah."
Ken Hovind CPA $2. Please have Rachel Slick on. We might reach out to her one of these days. We're still trying to get Matt Slick back on with Dr. Malpass because I still want to.
You won't get him on.
I know the reason we won't get him on again because the last time they had a discussion, Malpass just destroyed his tag argument. And even when I talked to Matt, I did a pretty decent job. Could have done better, but I did a pretty decent job in destroying his tag argument. But he had said on a Facebook page, I don't know if it was mine or somebody else, but he had said that not only did Alex Malpass not destroy his tag argument, but he actually demonstrated that God exists. And I told Alex about that. He's like, "Oh, really?" In his British, accent now. He's like, "Oh, really?" So he's like, "Well, maybe he reformulated. Let's see what he got. His God." And I asked Matt, "Well, do you have a new version that we don't know about?" He's like, "No, same one."
Remember. Hold on, I'm trying to get the actual accent of Discount Hoven down correctly. Remember, the proof that Christianity is real is that the Satanic Church exists.
Oh my god, that was so hilarious.
So an atheist church exists, therefore theism is true. I'm not sure that follows.
That was the exact thing. That was the exact word. Not the exact words that he said. He said other satanic religions exist, and so instead of just going for Satanism, I went, well, even Satanists don't believe in a literal Satan, and a literal Satan is kind of needed for your theism. But pagan religions, who you would also probably call satanic, also don't believe in a literal Satan for the most part. So it still doesn't follow.
I mean, technically, you could actually. I don't think it's illogical to even say you can believe in Satan without believing in a God.
It depends on how you're defining Satan. It really depends, because if you're defining Satan as just the opposer, then that's vague enough to be adherent to many things.
Satan, the adversary, the person that's supposed to be the prosecuting attorney was the Satan, right?
Yes, and again, that's why I said it depends on what you mean by Satan. Do you mean ex Lucifer Satan, or do you mean the idea of Satan as the opposer? Because if the idea of Satan as the opposer, that can be applied to many things outside of Christianity.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, we're going to be wrapping this up. Unfortunately, I got to get ready for our show tonight, which is with Dr. Misha Griffith.
I should be in bed.
And tomorrow, hopefully, if we still have her, Kelly Jones, Alex Jones' ex-wife. There's been a little bit of issues going on there, but hopefully we've resolved them all. And she'll be on tomorrow. Not this channel, but on the Non Sequitur Show channel. Link in the video description to the Non Sequitur Show. Hopefully everybody that's watching this also subscribes to the Non Sequitur Show. I would think so. I pretty much think that anybody who watches this channel probably watches the Non Sequitur. But not everybody who watches Non Sequitur watches this channel, right? Why not?
Yeah. Before we head off, I did want to say something that was pretty funny. So I'm tapping into my phone, or not my phone, my tablet, for the chat to say good evening, everyone. And the very second I put evening, the suggested word was Enoch.
Good Enoch.
Good Enoch.
Good evening, Enoch.
Yeah, have a good Enoch.
Yeah.
Can I ask, Steve?
Yes.
How do you think I did?
I think it did pretty well, actually. I mean, for a first time thing, not too bad. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have any criticism of your argumentation per se. I mean, you made your points. Again, I think you may not want to rethink the ichtheist position a little bit, but that's up to you. I mean, you could be actually an ichtheist. I mean, I'm not saying that you're not, obviously, but it's just hard to think. It's hard to be an ichtheist and have conversations about God because it just would be a meaningless word.
I think the first time I came across it, I think I heard Aaron Ra say he was.
Aaron says a lot of weird things.
Yes, I
Aaron,
know it does.
Aaron's like to say he's an epistivist, which is a made up word. Like, well, all words are made up, but it's a neologism that Bionic Dance came up with, and it's dumb. I'm sorry, but epistivist is a dumb word. It basically negates all forms of knowledge unless it's from kind of scientific knowledge. It's basically a form of logical positivism and verificationism, and there's a lot of reasons why that stuff is kind of crappy. And matter of fact, Cyrus is going to be doing a video. One of the things he's been including is on Clifford's principle and evidentialism. I think that people fall into this trap because they love science so much, and I love science too, but they fall in this trap that science is the only way to gain knowledge, right? And if it's not provable, then it doesn't exist, kind of thing. And that's not how you should go into discussions, especially abstract discussions and things dealing with existential.
Science works.
Yeah, it's not even how science works.
It's
right?
not even how it works.
So yeah, when people say they're epistivist or people say they're evidentialist, I don't know if they really have thought it through, because I have never met I don't think I've really met an evidentialist who's an actual evidentialist that I'm aware of. And I only can think of 3 people that fall into scientism: Aaron Ra, Bionic Dance, and who was it the other day that fell into scientism?
Deconverted Man.
Deconverted Man. Thank you. But other than that, I never see it. You know, but would you agree that those 3 examples are examples of scientism?
Yeah, I would agree. Well, especially since Aaron Rawls actually said several times that he is an epistivist.
Yeah, and I love Aaron.
Position.
I really do. The utmost respect for the man. I mean, he is fucking amazing for what he does.
Yeah.
But I do have to. I mean, we get into discuss it, but you know what? We're still friends at the end of the day. I mean, we still bullshit on our show. We had a great time last show. It was great.
Yeah.
He loved it. He was begging us to come back on. He's like, please let me be in that episode. Please let me. When you have Aaron Robb begging you to come back on, you've made it. Because I mean, I have respect for Aaron because he's just an awesome dude.
And I've had both Aaron and Bionic Dance on my channel. I like both of them.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Bionics, but that's okay. Other people are, and God bless them. But not
Bless your heart, Steve.
Bless my little heart. Hey, that's Southern for fuck you.
Well, Steve, the thing is, and I am from the South, so yes, we do say that for fuck you.
Yeah,
But,
that's true.
I am too. I'm in Georgia.
Yeah.
Bless
But
your
Steve,
heart.
can we trust anything that you say since you don't exist?
Probably not. And by the way, I have a blog on that. Did you ever read my blog, Frustrated?
I did not. You're gonna have to send it to me on Twitter so that way I can read it.
All right, I'll get it to you later. But I have a blog on the problem of not believing, and probably not my finest one because I really did it late at night. But I had somebody proofread it. But it's really weird when people say things like, "Well, I don't believe X. I don't believe that. I don't have any beliefs." Well, then you don't have any knowledge. Simple as that. There is no way around that. If you don't have beliefs, you cannot have knowledge. There is no way around that.
Like, for instance, for those who say that they know that a God does not exist, if they know it, then they also subsequently believe that no God exists at the same time.
Yes.
Run the by me again.
I said that, for instance, if you take the person who says, I know there is no God.
Okay.
He knows it, but he also subsequently believes that there is no God at the same time.
Wait. So he believes there's a God. He knows there's a God, and he believes the God at the same time.
No, he knows that a God does not exist,
Mhm.
and therefore he also believes that this God does not exist.
That's sound. What's wrong with that?
Yeah,
What's wrong?
I was just agreeing with you. And
Yeah. Because clearly, if you believe a God, if you believe that a God, if you know a God doesn't exist, you also believe that a God does not exist. However, if you believe God doesn't exist, that doesn't mean that you know God exists. Knowledge is a subset of belief, right? So if you know X, you also believe X or P, either or. But a lot of people don't seem to get that, right? I mean, they don't seem to think that. Look at how do I know something if I don't have belief first? You can't. That's in every theory of knowledge out there. Belief is a requirement. It's a necessary precondition to have knowledge. So, I mean, does anybody in the live chat disagree with that? I'm curious, just before we end this, that if people say they don't have any beliefs, it is an epistemic reality that they don't have any knowledge. If that's the case, which I don't.
Well, there was a comment in the live chat saying that how else would you gain knowledge besides the scientific method? And I think I found the best response to that, which was read a book.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look at scientific method involves science, experimentation and these other things. But when you read something, right, when you gain knowledge from your senses. I mean, I look at if I touch my hand on a hot stove, I don't have to repeat that 1,000 times. No, it fucking hurts, and probably shouldn't do it again. Right? There's no scientific method involved there. There's no repeatability. I'm done at that point. It's sensory perception.
I need peer review to demonstrate that when you actually put your hand on, not only are you in pain, but I need proof that not only are you in pain, but you believe you're in pain. Can you prove to me that you believe that?
And somebody asked, well, where the knowledge comes from the book? Well, not always from the scientific method. I have knowledge of a poem.
I know
by scientific methodology. No, it's a poem.
I know a lot about particular video game franchises. I didn't use the scientific method to get there, and they probably didn't use it to make it up.
Although that is a little bit of equivocation. I'm going to call myself out for that, but that's okay. Because I'm using knowledge a little bit differently, but whatever. Before somebody else points that out. But I mean, there are things that I know without having, for example, analytical knowledge of like mathematics, right? You don't do scientific experiments for mathematics. I know 1 + 1 = 2 is a true proposition, right? I know it.
Yeah.
That's knowledge.
Skeptic 77 says, yeah, but the process of your brain recognizing the pain can be described by the scientific method.
That's different, though.
Yes, that is.
Yeah, that's completely it's completely different from what we're saying, though. We're saying that I've learned, right? I've gained knowledge that the proposition that if I put my hand on that stove and it's hot, it's going to hurt. I don't need the scientific method for that.
I think the thing that covers this best, the best way that I've ever heard this worded, is the scientific method is a methodology. It is not an epistemology.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it is. It completely. Matter of fact, I'm going to end this. And by the way, you can go look this up on Google, but you won't. I don't think you're going to find it because it's kind of obscure thing. But what do you think? Like, especially according to, I even give the person that said it, Richard Feynman. What is the first thing in the scientific method after you observe? So you have an observation, you observe. Thank you. Who said that? Yes,
me, Tim.
Yes.
I saw the lecture.
Yes. That's a brilliant lecture, right? Brilliant lecture that Feynman did.
I think he's a phenomenal thing. I remember what someone was saying about him. They would ask him about a certain theory or thing, and he'd say, well, I don't know. But when they started talking about it, he knew, because he wasn't interested in what the things were called. He was interested in what was underneath.
One of the smartest men ever.
Yes.
Bar none. But I love what you said about guess, because that's another thing. When I hear an atheist say something along the lines, well, there's no guessing in science. Guess what? You're wrong. Okay, you're wrong.
No. There's definitely a lot of guessing.
But that's the thing that I think that Sirs in his video may want to point out, things like that are so ingrained in this narrative. To be an atheist, you have to hold to these certain things, and you have to hold like the science stuff. But I think they get a lot of stuff wrong, because I'm actually people argue that science isn't guesswork. Well, it starts off. Yeah, you start off with a guess, and you refine that into a hypothesis.
Even as you're going through this stuff, like for instance, take whenever they were trying to calculate the temperature of the radiation of space from the Big Bang. They calculated and they said, okay, this is just roughly a guess, but it's more or less than 3 Kelvin.
Yep.
This is not
it was a little higher than that, if I remember correctly, for what they're.
No, actually, what it actually came to be was 2.7 plus or minus like 0.01.
Yeah, I've heard like 2.73, 2.725. I think their initial estimates was what was their initial? Do you remember the initial estimates? It was a little bit higher than that, wasn't it?
It might have been higher than by a few points, but it was roughly the initial estimate.
Yeah, but it was a guess. It was a guess. I mean, that's more of an educated guess, obviously. Yeah. But I mean, if even when I first formulated something, I still I can make a guess about what could possibly be reasons for this, and then kind of whittle that down to a more educated guess, right?
Yeah,
There's nothing wrong
and
with that.
educated guesses tend to usually be spot on, but it doesn't negate the fact that they're still guesses.
But that's a perfect example of when they actually predicted something, and guess
Mhm.
what? They discovered it. I mean, that's verifying the theory. When I told Chris about Tiktaalik, do you think he's ever heard of that before?
No.
Probably so, but he might have heard it in passing through, of course, all these different young Earth creationists who try to bring that up and say, "Oh no, this is not a transitional fossil."
I think. I'm sorry. I don't think they actually hear that. They don't. They. You might say the words to them. You say what it is. They walk away and they haven't heard it. It hasn't sunk in because it disputes their knowledge. It's the cognitive dissonance. I think it's just the fingers in the ear, isn't it? It's Trump's alternative facts, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Also, I think when he said Trotsky, I heard I saw Trotsky and I was like, wait, doesn't he mean? I heard Trotskyevsky and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. No, it is Raskolnikov.
Yeah, it was called. He was lead character in Judgment. That's why I was wondering what they're talking about. They're saying, he said, "Are you?" Yeah, he was saying, "Are you saying you don't want to be like Trotsky, Dostoevsky, who wrote Crime and Punishment?" When Jordan Peterson was saying, "Well, when it was Ozzy that asked him that question, by the way." Do you guys know that? Ozzy asked him that question during the Jordan Peterson Matt Dillahunty debate.
I think a true atheist would be like Raskolnikov.
Yeah, I was blown away by that, and I love the way Matt just shut his ass down. But I was like, what? And he's not the first person to posit something like that, because the narrative, and I haven't read Crime and Punishment beyond the Cliff Notes, but the narrative of the lead character committed a crime, and then it was all about him feeling guilt or not feeling guilt, kind of thing, for the remorse and the causal change that have happened after he killed the woman, right?
But Steve, the last thing that Dostoevsky ever did in any of his novels was straw man his characters.
That's pretty good.
I'm not Ocean. I can't do it like
Ocean does extremely well. But I don't understand how he thinks that's a cogent response to what he thinks an atheist would be morality wise. Because
I would just say that, you know what, you're right. The atheists you're thinking of are like Raskolnikov. Pure fiction.
Here we go. One last challenge before we go here. Chad Eckert, I can get Steve to agree to being an atheist. Oh.
Ooh,
challenge
accepted. Yeah, I'll take the challenge accepted. If he's just going to say, well, according to definition, colloquial definitions, you're an atheist. Sure, I'm by definition a colloquial atheist. Okay, whatever. But that's not what I am. I mean, that's just something. Oh, by some general definition, you fit this. Yeah, I fit that. But that doesn't mean that's actually my position. Because when you say you're an atheist, that's a position that you're taking, and I don't take that position epistemically, even though I've proven, and
I will say this: Steve has said many times that if you go off of everything, he is, by this colloquial definition, the weak atheist.
Well, yeah, that's what it is.
It doesn't mean he is an atheist.
Yeah, weak. By the way, a weak atheist and an agnostic are logically, syntactically the same. In other words, all weak atheists and agnostics hold the same logical position.
Yeah, he's going off the colloquial.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that one coming. You're not my first rodeo there, buddy. But yeah, it's weird because I always acknowledge, sure, there's a colloquial definition that makes myself would be a colloquial atheist, but I reject that definition. But see, they won't accept that philosophically they're agnostics. Cyrus will. Because Cyrus recognizes it and he goes, yeah, well, you know what? I'm colloquially an atheist, but I'm philosophically agnostic. I'm at least willing to say, sure, this colloquial definition is out there. By them, you can accept it. I reject it. But they're not willing to say, so according to philosophy, I'd be agnostic. Do you know how many atheists I found are willing to acknowledge that? I don't think any. Why is that?
I don't know much about philosophy, so I don't ever give an answer on what I am philosophically.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's that difficult to determine where a person is. I mean, there's only a couple questions you need to ask to really kind of narrow down what a person's label would be. They don't have to accept it, but that's generally like if I say, do you hold the belief that at least one God exists? I think everybody would agree that would be considered to be a theist, right? I don't see anybody arguing that.
Right.
Okay, so you just go from there. Is that a position you hold?
You just you can just have somebody use the Socratic method on you, and you can get there pretty quick.
Yeah, so okay, you don't hold that position. So we know now you are not a theist, right?
Correct.
Okay, so the next step would be, do you hold a position that there are no gods?
That there are no gods?
Yeah.
Mm.
Like I believe there's no such thing as a unicorn that exists. I hold the belief that there are no universe anywhere in the universe. There's no such thing as a unicorn. I hold that belief. Do you hold the belief that there are no gods?
I would probably say so.
Then you're a strong atheist. You're a philosophical atheist, and you have a burden of proof.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's good, because my other argument, which again, I think I'm the only. I like to make unique arguments, but it's so hard because everybody just regurgitates the same old arguments unless you're really, really into this stuff and you can make your own arguments. I'm not at that level, but there are some very simple arguments that I've come forth that I don't think I've ever heard before. Like the argument that I do think it makes more sense that if you want to promote atheism, you should do it from the strong point rather than the weak. And the way I basically would argue that would be, if a theist says, hey, Steve, I believe in God. And I just say, well, I don't believe you. The theist should say, well, who the fuck are you? Why do I care? And walk away. Why would they want to engage with somebody who just doesn't believe them? They're not giving a reason why they don't believe them. They're not ready to proffer anything that they have a conversation. But if they came and said, hey, a theist said, I don't believe, so I believe that God exists, and they come to me and I say, hey, you know what? I believe that they don't. Oh, okay. Now we have something to talk about, because I hold a belief of this. He holds the belief of the negation. Now you can have a conversation, and you can also say, look, I got a burden of proof. Let me show you why there are no gods, or why I believe there's no gods. And at that point, the theist might go, you know what? That makes sense. And they might actually leave theism because of that. Let me ask this question. How many theists do you think would leave theism if the only thing they ever got back from somebody was, well, I just don't believe you?
I don't think there would be any at all.
Right. So how is that a really great way to promote theism? Because you're not giving them anything. You're just saying, well, I don't believe you. But then who the hell cares? They have no onus to make that you believe them. And Smitty says, you don't have a burden of proof just for having beliefs. You have a burden of proof if you're making a fact claim. That's incorrect. If you have a belief, you have a burden of proof. They're intrinsically attached. So I should say this. If you want to have a justified belief, you want to have a rational belief, then you have a burden of proof, right? All epistemical claims of a belief have to be justified for them to be rational. So if I say I believe this, then I have a burden of proof attached to that if I want to have a rational belief. That's a fact.
Can I say two things first?
You can say three if you want. I like you. I'll give you four things.
Right. I am looking for live conversations. So
are they all saying, Steve, you're an idiot? Is that the general consensus?
I'm not saying the live chat.
Oh, they're all saying Steve is correct, 100% correct. I 100% believe Steve on this. Actually, they are saying that. It's actually the truth. Go look in the video when it's done. Thank you, guys. But go ahead.
And the other thing I was going to ask, what would you say would be success for atheism in the States?
I'm a big advocate of secular society, right? And I think that's advantageous for theist and atheist. And I want to see creationism out of school, right? There is no teach the alternative. There is an alternative. There's the theory of evolution.
Teach the controversy, Steve.
Yeah, it's like saying, okay, we should teach students the controversy of the theory of gravity. There is no controversy. Now, there's some questions about theory of gravity at certain situations, right? Like quantum loop gravity doesn't play well with it, but there is nothing. There's an alternative to the theory of gravity. We can use the theory of gravity to model shit. It works. Well, we can use the theory of evolution the same way. So that's what I want to see. So when you ask about what atheists should push, it is to have a secular society.
Yes, I think from my point of view, from over the pond, if you like, I would like to see you become a society where you could elect a president who says he or she is an atheist.
I'm okay. Yeah, dude, I'm more than okay with that.
That would be wonderful, because I would like a person's particular religion to not even be a talking point.
Except for the fact it scares the hell out of me. I got a phone going off. Sorry, it scares the hell out of me that the Vice President of the United States doesn't understand evolution. And somebody pointed this out the other day, and they used it for what did they use it for? Climate change. They said instead of asking people if they believe in climate change, they should ask people, do you understand climate change? And I've said the similar things about evolution. It's not that we should ask people if they believe in evolution or not. It is, do you understand evolution? That there is no, I mean, yes, it's fine that you believe whatever, because we all believe evolution is true. If you say I don't believe evolution is true, you're an idiot, and that's even going for the people that accept evolution, because they're the biggest ones. If you accept evolution and then you say, "Well, I don't believe in evolution," you got problems, man. You got problems. But it happens. It literally happens. You think I'm making this up, Tim? There are people that are out there that say things like, "Well, yeah, I know evolution's true, but I don't believe in evolution. I don't believe it." I'm like, do you not listen to yourself? That's just stupid. That's what makes some atheists look really dumb when they do that kind of stuff.
When you brought up climate change, what really pisses me off is when people sit there and say, "Well, the climate has risen higher in the past before." It's like, yes, but not at the current rate that it's
there's relative minima and relative maxima, right? But overall, over the last 200 years, it's damn near 2 degrees Celsius. I think it's like 1.8 or 1.7 degrees Celsius. That data is indisputable. I don't even know anybody that argues that.
Yeah, but
they'll
not
argue
only
where
that,
it's from, though.
But the thing is that this climate rate change, if you actually look at the period of time that it has grown, it is drastic compared to for instance, when they say, "Oh yeah, well, it's been this high before in the past," it's like, yes, well, how long did it take to get there? How many years?
But they don't seem to understand how it works over a period of time, a longer period of time, right? There's an overall net that's been over the last 200 years. That's what they're looking at.
What frightens me is that it's like the climate change deniers. It's like driving a car towards the cliff, and you're told there's a cliff there, and not stopping and saying, "How do we stop the car going over the cliff?"
We might be over the cliff now. I think I've read things where they say that we're actually either past the tipping point or at least on the tipping point.
Yeah.
And that's disconcerting, because in 50 years from now, there might be some huge differences in the ecology, especially the erosion of various states, Florida and California especially. Who knows what the sea level is going to do with the killing off of the life in the oceans.
Yeah, and is the refugee problem, isn't there? It's going to be an enormous refugee problem.
So we may not in our lifetime see the effects of climate change to be that dramatic, but I mean, my daughter sure might.
Yeah,
our kids and grandkids may get to the point where, like, for instance, I live right off the coast of the Gulf. My kids or my grandkids at one point in time may not be able to live where I live now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So anyways, I got to wrap this up because I do have Dr. Misha Griffith on tonight on the Non Sequitur Show. So we'll see you guys over there. And thanks for watching this. Again, sorry that I went full Skylar fiction, but I couldn't help myself. I was like, this is just so bad from Chris.
I'd say we just blame Skylar for it.
And I
blocking in the chat for so long.
And I think it's one of those things that, look, if somebody gets embarrassed enough by being just shown that they're wrong, and I'm happy to have a longer discussion with them, they do change their position. Some of them do. Like Wayne Filmer changed his position. He was shown to be wrong, and he learned from it. Now he's a very critical thinker, or tries to be. But he definitely rejects young Earth creationism. And when I met him, he was about as pro young Earther as you can get. But I happen to like the guy, and when he challenged me, and I don't take challenge any longer, but I did back then, I was like, god dang it. Okay, let me wipe the floor with you.
What I'm going to do with Chris is I'm going to have a private conversation with him.
That might not be a bad idea. That might be a bad idea.
Yes, because he might I think he left feeling very threatened.
Yeah, and that's not the intention. However, again, maybe the first time, maybe might be not be a bad thing for him to be a little shell shocked, because he just, as well as I do, he was just wronger than wrong on so many issues.
Yes, yes. I think
I'm disputing that claim, Steve. I'm sorry. He was not even wrong.
Not even wrong.
Not even wrong.
the thing to do, if I can get him to read a book.
I gave him a few. Neil Shubin, or you, who said "Why Evolution Is True" by Coyne. Was that you?
Yes, me. Yes.
And I've reached out to Coyne, but he won't come on. But
it's such an easy book to read and to understand. Dawkins is a bit heavyweight.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the way Dawkins writes, to be honest with you.
And things like that. Jerry just puts things, he talks about ring species and things like this. And I think it makes people think.
Yeah, except when they tell me that ring species aren't a thing, and then I know they're going to quote Coyne, and then I realize, I knew that I knew what he wrote about it. He was actually commissioned to do a study on ring speciation, and he determined that there are no pure ring species. Okay, great, but that in the mindset of a creationist was like, oh, ring species have been disproven. No, that is not what he said. Go read his paper. And that drives me nuts, because I had that discussion again not more than a couple weeks ago. People were like, no, Steve, you got to read what Coyne said. I'm like, dude, this is not my first fucking radio. Please. I know every freaking creationist argument out there at this point. But anyways, let's wrap this up. See you guys tonight.
Right.
And Tim, thanks for joining. This was fun. I'm glad you reached out to me to have this discussion. Welcome to the Great Debate community, and hope you have many more.
Yes, I hope I do. I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Awesome. And tweet this out and let other people come by and watch and leave comments.
I don't use Facebook and I don't use tweet.
I don't blame you. But everybody else who's watching, maybe they can kind of send it out. Anyway, sir, it's always a pleasure. Frustrated as well. And we'll see you tonight. Non Sequitur Show.
All righty.